Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Sierra Lamar. Sierra was born on October 19, 1996, with an older sister Danielle, who was about 4 years older. Despite their comfortable upbringing, the sisters experienced a traumatic incident when they were younger. Their father, Steve, engaged in inappropriate sexual behavior with a classmate during a sleepover. When the truth was discovered, Steve pleaded no contest to indecent actions with a child and was sentenced to 1 year in prison. This revelation devastated the family, ultimately leading to Steve and Sierra's mother, Marlene, ending their relationship. After the breakup, Marlene started dating a new man. Meanwhile, Sierra and Danielle attended Washington High School, where they were socially active and performed moderately well academically. Sierra was known for her happy-go-lucky personality, being fun-loving, vivacious, and kind. She enjoyed participating in dance competitions and cheering. Marlene moved from Fremont to Morgan Hill, a city 40 miles southwest, with Sierra and Rick Gardner, her boyfriend, in October 2011. They rented a rural ranch-style home on Pito Hispanic Court, surrounded by agricultural land. Rick worked in construction, but money was still tight despite his business improving. Sierra was unhappy about leaving her friends and hobbies behind, starting anew in a place where she knew no one. At Washington High, she was well liked, but at SA High School, she didn't receive the same warm welcome. However, with time, Sierra settled in, made friends, earned her peers' respect, and even rejoined the cheerleading squad. By March 2012, Sierra had adapted to her new surroundings. On March 11th, she called her Fremont-based parents to give them an update. The conversation was largely positive. She was excited about an upcoming school assignment, wanted to dye her hair on her next Fremont visit, and discussed her homework with her sister. Sierra was doing well academically and ended her chat with Danielle and Steve on Thursday evening, promising to talk to them again soon, unaware that it would be their last conversation. The next morning, February 16, 2012, began like any other in Morgan Hill. Sierra's family got ready for the day around 6 a.m. Her parents, Rick and Marlene, left for work, and Sierra prepared for school. Before leaving the house, she tweeted a friend at 6:29 a.m. Sierra lived far from her school, SA High School, and had to cross a deserted road between Palm and Dury Avenues to catch the bus. As she walked, she texted a friend at 7:11 a.m. to arrange a meetup before classes started. However, when the bus arrived at 7:15 a.m., Sierra was missing. Sierra's friend didn't show up to meet her, so Sierra skipped class, and possibly even skipped school altogether. Her friends found this weird, but they didn't think it was important enough to tell the school. The day went on as usual. When the school day ended, Marlene, Sierra's mom, contacted Sierra as usual to check in on her. However, Sierra's phone went straight to voicemail, which was unusual. Marlene didn't panic yet, but when she got home and saw that Sierra's room was still empty, she knew something was off. Marlene contacted Steve, Sierra's dad, to see if Sierra was planning to visit him in Fremont, which would have been inconvenient, but not alarming. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case. When Sierra's friends, including Danielle, didn't hear from her, they all left the same worried messages. Marlene finally called SA High School and discovered that Sierra had missed all her classes. Marlene was frantic, recalling their goodbyes that morning. She said that Sierra had spoken to her, said goodbye, and given her a hug. Everything had seemed fine, and she had told her she loved her. She couldn't believe that she wouldn't contact her friends to let them know she was okay and put them through all that suffering. Officers were immediately sent to Pito Hispanic Court after the authorities were notified. But since Sierra could have disappeared at any moment, there was no specific location for investigators to start their search. They began by questioning those closest to Sierra, including her friends, who were all truthful about the difficult situation Sierra and her family were facing. Although Sierra was typically happy, her mother's recent divorce had forced her to leave her family and old friends behind just a few months prior. The authorities suspected that she might have voluntarily left, given that she often made light-hearted and serious comments about returning to Fremont. Despite the police downplaying Sierra's disappearance, other factors suggested the opposite. Sierra's sudden disappearance was marked by a complete lack of activity. She stopped posting on social media and didn't respond to calls, which went straight to voicemail. Her phone was off, and her loved ones were left with no way to contact her. As a result, a massive search effort was launched to find her. The investigation began 2 days after Sierra vanished, on a Sunday morning. During this time, data forensics experts analyzed her phone's previous activity and made a surprising discovery. In the middle of the night, her phone had briefly turned on, sending a single electrical ping before shutting off again. The phone's coordinates at the time were traced back to a field near Sierra's house at dawn, providing a crucial lead in the case. A search team carefully searched the area where Sierra's phone had last been located and quickly found it near the road. The phone, a Samsung Galaxy, was badly damaged and had clearly been thrown from a vehicle. Investigators determined that Sierra hadn't turned on her phone that evening, but rather the rain had temporarily charged the phone, causing it to send a false signal. A crucial piece of evidence was discovered by sheer luck. The outcome of the investigation hinges on the authorities finding the girl's phone, which was made possible by a raindrop causing a short circuit. Given the circumstances, the detectives were particularly disturbed by the fact that her phone seemed to have been thrown from a moving vehicle, with no signs of footprints, tire tracks, or any other visible evidence. The next day, a search team made a chilling discovery. 2 kilometers from Sierra's house, they found her backpack discarded outside a barn, containing her schoolwork, inhaler, and money, items she would have needed for school. It appeared she was forced to abandon her essential belongings. Furthermore, a complete set of clothing, possibly what she was wearing the morning she disappeared, was found in her luggage. This included her pullover pants, socks, shoes, and undergarments. The outfit was sent for DNA testing, which yielded promising results. The DNA analysis revealed the presence of male DNA on her pants, indicating that she was likely assaulted. Following Sierra's disappearance, the search efforts significantly intensified, with a surge in local and international sympathy after her phone and clothing were found. The authorities received over 1,000 new leads and invested more than 7,000 hours into the investigation. A massive search operation was launched, involving over 800 individuals divided into multiple teams. The teams meticulously searched every lake, reservoir, and field in the area, and also combed through abandoned buildings. Sierra's name became a household name, with posters plastered all over the community. Her parents even offered a $10,000 reward for any credible information leading to her discovery. Despite the exhaustive efforts, however, only a golf ball and a flip-flop were found. 12 days after Sierra's disappearance, investigators made a breakthrough in the case. A DNA sample found on her pants was matched to a local man, Antolin Garcia Torres, who lived in the Morgan Hill area. This discovery came after authorities compared the DNA to that of all 57 registered sex offenders living in the same zip code. It's worth noting that Sierra's father, a registered offender himself, voluntarily came forward and shared his prior criminal history with the police shortly after his daughter went missing. He was quickly cleared as a suspect, allowing investigators to focus on other leads. Antolin Garcia Torres, a 21-year-old man, became a person of interest due to the DNA match. At the time, he lived with his mother, pregnant wife, and young daughter at the Maple Leaf RV Park, approximately 7 miles from Sierra's home. Antolin's past is concerning, marked by a difficult upbringing with abuse and neglect. His father was abusive and even threatened to kill Antolin and his mother before being imprisoned for molesting a family member. Unfortunately, Antolin seemed to have inherited his father's harmful behavior. In 2009, he was accused of having sex with a minor, but the charges were dropped. However, his DNA was collected during the investigation. The following year, he was detained for interfering with police operations. The suspicious relationship between Sierra and Antolin raised concerns, leading detectives to keep a close eye on him. Since Antolin was the most likely person to know Sierra's whereabouts, the police took steps to monitor his movements and communication. They tapped his phone, placed a GPS tracker in his car, and even stationed 2 undercover investigators in an RV next to his house to keep him under surveillance. Investigating Antolin's alibi, detectives reviewed security footage from the RV park and neighboring areas on the day of Sierra's disappearance. The footage revealed that Antolin had left the campground in his red Volkswagen Jetta at 7 a.m., which corresponded with the time frame of Sierra's kidnapping, given the short 7-mile distance between his home and Sierra's. Although Antolin claimed to have gone to work, Safeway's records showed he never arrived on March 16th. Further inquiry by his management uncovered disturbing information. 3 attempted kidnappings had occurred in the same Safeway parking lot just 3 years prior, although the perpetrators were never caught. The only evidence from these incidents was a dropped taser with a partial fingerprint on one of its batteries. However, a complete match would require a direct one-to-one comparison. The thought of Antolin being the suspect seemed appealing, but when his fingerprints were matched with those on the taser, the investigators were shocked to discover that he was their man. The evidence was mounting against him. His DNA was found on Sierra's pants, and he had a history of involvement in kidnappings. This was enough to detain him and seize his car for further DNA testing. During the interview, Antolin came across as arrogant, but the test results were damaging. He claimed to have gone fishing on the day Sierra vanished and had no idea who she was. However, the investigators were skeptical of his explanation. What's more, Antolin made a strange admission. He had a disturbing habit of strangling snakes while driving and throwing them out the window. He also admitted to throwing a used tissue out the window in the same spot where Sierra's bag was found on the morning she disappeared. This, combined with the 1 in a million chance of rain on Sierra's phone, made his explanation seem even more implausible. As a result, Antolin Garcia Torres was formally arrested on May 21, 2012, in connection with Sierra Lamar's disappearance, outside his workplace in a Safeway parking lot. Distinct evidence linkages were found between Sierra and Antolin's vehicle. A DNA examination confirmed that Sierra's DNA was present on the rear door's interior door handle. Furthermore, fibers on Sierra's clothing matched those on Antolin's car seats, and a piece of rope in his car contained a hair strand from Sierra. This evidence conclusively proves that Sierra was in Antolin's car at some point. Despite Antolin's arrest, a significant issue remained. Sierra's body had not been found, and her death had not been verified. This raised the question of whether Antolin could be accused of first-degree murder without a body or confirmed death. Santa Clara County District Attorney Jeff Rosson announced on May 19, 2014, that he would seek the death penalty against Antolin. Although Antolin had pleaded not guilty to Sierra's murder, the overwhelming evidence against him left little room for error. After delays, Antolin's trial finally began on January 30, 2017. The case of Adrienne Jones. Adrienne Jessica Jones was a bright light in Mansfield in 1995. As a 16-year-old junior at Mansfield High School, she captivated everyone with her beauty, exceptional qualities, and impressive achievements. Adrienne was an outstanding student, consistently excelling in advanced honors courses and demonstrating a strong work ethic. She spent at least 2 hours each night studying to ensure her success, which earned her high grades. Her kindness, intelligence, and infectious spirit made her a role model and a beloved figure among her classmates and teachers. In addition to her academic prowess, Adrienne was a talented athlete. She was a dedicated member of the girls' soccer team, showcasing remarkable skill and dedication on the field. After graduating from Mansfield High School, Adrienne's dream was to become a veterinarian and help animals. After a game injury forced her to temporarily leave her team, Adrienne didn't give up on sports. Instead, she joined the girls' cross-country team, which allowed her to stay active and improve her fitness. She threw herself into the new challenge, working hard to get in shape. Her dedication paid off, and she soon became a key member of the cross-country team. In addition to her academic and athletic pursuits, Adrienne also held down a part-time job, working 20 hours a week at a local fast food restaurant, Golden Fried Chicken. Despite her busy schedule, Adrienne enjoyed being the center of attention, particularly from teenage boys in Mansfield. Her friends would even describe her as a bit of a flirt. She took great care in her appearance, spending at least 2 hours each day on her makeup to ensure she looked perfect. Adrienne, like many teenagers, often tested the limits set by her parents. Despite her good nature, her parents were particularly protective of her due to the changing environment in Mansfield, where crime was on the rise. They implemented a strict 9 p.m. curfew on weekends to ensure her safety, requiring her to provide proof of her activities, such as ticket stubs, if she wanted to stay out later. To prevent her from sneaking out, her father also nailed her bedroom window shut. Although Adrienne occasionally disobeyed her parents and left the house at night to meet her friends, on Sunday, December 3rd, 1995, she was given special permission to stay up late to talk to her boyfriend, Tracy Smith, who was out of town with his parents. During their phone conversation, Adrienne's mother overheard her mention that another call was coming in. When asked about the caller's identity, Adrienne said it was David from her cross-country team, who seemed upset about something. Adrienne's family started their day as usual the next morning, but her mother's concern grew when she heard Adrienne's alarm still going off in her bedroom. When she went to check on her, she discovered that Adrienne was missing, and her bed had not been slept in. Despite trying to stay calm, Adrienne's mother quickly became worried. She initially thought Adrienne might have gone for an early morning run, but this idea was quickly dismissed when she saw Adrienne's running shoes still on the floor. In the past, Adrienne had occasionally sneaked out at night to meet friends, but she had always returned home by morning, making her mother even more worried about her disappearance. Worried about Adrienne, her parents contacted the police. Unbeknownst to them, a shocking discovery was made on a farm several miles away. At around 7 a.m., on Seaton Road in Grand Prairie, Texas, a man was on his way to check his mailbox when he noticed that the gate to his property had been knocked down. Curious, he entered his farm and was met with an unsettling scene. Initially, the man thought he was looking at roadkill, but as he got closer, he realized it was a lifeless teenage girl lying on the ground. The man immediately called the police, who arrived to find a disturbing sight. The teenager had been shot execution style, with 2 bullet wounds on her left cheek and forehead. In addition to these gunshot wounds, her head had suffered severe injuries. Moreover, her arms and legs were covered in scrapes and bruises, indicating that she had run through the farm's barbed wire gate. A teenager's violent murder sparked a desperate investigation. The fact that she was found in her nightclothes suggested she had been preparing for bed when her life was brutally cut short. The execution-style killing led police to consider possible links to gang violence or drugs. After discovering the body on the farm, the Grand Prairie Police immediately alerted all nearby agencies, sending out a detailed description of the victim, including her age, height, weight, and other physical characteristics. They hoped that another agency might recognize the description and make a connection to a missing person. It wasn't long before the Mansfield police got in touch with Grand Prairie officers, having made a match. The Mansfield police identified the murdered teenager as Adrienne Jones. With the victim identified, the police had the heartbreaking task of informing Adrienne's parents about her tragic death. When they broke the news to her mother, she was overcome with grief. In the small town of Mansfield, news of Adrienne's murder spread quickly through her high school. leaving her classmates and friends devastated. Classes were interrupted as the news traveled through the halls, and students tearfully consoled one another. The town was on high alert following the discovery of Adrianne's body in a field, with rumors and theories circulating about her death. One theory was that Adrianne was involved in drugs, while others suspected a serial killer might be living among them. Adrianne's parents cooperated with the police, providing information about the last time they saw their daughter. Her mother specifically mentioned a phone call Adrianne had with her boyfriend, Tracy, and another teenager, David, who joined the call while Adrianne was on the phone. After midnight on the night of Adrianne's murder, one of her younger brothers heard a car engine outside their house. When he looked out the window, he saw a pickup truck driving away. The police were interested in identifying a person named David, who had called Adrianne that night. To learn more, they spoke with Adrianne's cross-country coach, who mentioned a team member named David Graham. However, the coach was surprised to hear that David had called Adrianne, as there was no indication that they had ever interacted before. David Graham was a 17-year-old high school student with big dreams. After watching his first air show, he decided he wanted to become an Air Force pilot. From then on, he dedicated himself to achieving his goal. David was well liked by his peers at Mansfield High School, where he was popular and charming. Many girls were attracted to him, but he was in a relationship with Diane Zamora, a high school senior who shared his desire to enter the military. Diane stood out from the crowd, actively pursuing her aspirations. After Adrianne's murder, the police interviewed David Graham, who acknowledged knowing her from their cross-country team, but claimed their relationship never went beyond friendship. When asked if he had contacted Adrianne on the night of her death, David denied it, saying he was home studying with his girlfriend, Diane Zamora. The police investigated David as a possible suspect, seeking information from Adrianne's friends to see if she had ever mentioned him. However, one of her closest friends, who was privy to Adrianne's secrets, said Adrianne had never discussed David with her. The police also checked Adrianne's phone book and found David's number was not listed, which further led them to believe he was not involved in her murder. As a result, they never administered a polygraph test to David, and eventually cleared him as a suspect. The police investigated Adrianne's boyfriend, Tracy Smith, as a suspect in her murder. However, they cleared him after verifying his alibi, which placed him out of town with his family on the night of the murder. Tracy also passed a polygraph test, further supporting his innocence. During his police interview, Tracy suggested they investigate someone named Brian, whom Adrianne had mentioned was calling her on the night of her murder, while they were on the phone. The police identified the Brian in question as Brian McMillian, a local teenager. Their investigation into Brian McMillian revealed that he used to work at a pharmacy near the restaurant where Adrianne used to work. Brian had developed an obsession with Adrianne and would often visit the restaurant to catch a glimpse of her. Eventually, Adrianne grew tired of his constant presence and began hiding in the back whenever she saw him coming. The police questioned Brian McMillian about the murder of Adrienne Jones. At first, he claimed to have no knowledge of her, but later admitted to knowing her. When asked if he had talked to her on the night of her murder, Brian said he didn't remember. He explained that he had been drinking that night due to feelings of depression and loneliness. The officers also asked Brian if he had visited Adrianne's house on the night of her murder, and he acknowledged that he might have done so. The police asked Brian's father if his son could take a lie detector test, but his father refused. 1 week later, the police raided Brian's house with guns, a decision made due to concerns that he might be armed. The police took this precaution to ensure everyone's safety, including their own. After Brian was arrested for Adrianne's murder, many people came forward to show their support for him. Brian's friends said he was a gentle and non-violent person. His father also confirmed that Brian was at home all night when Adrianne was killed and didn't leave. Despite this, Brian was held in jail for 3 weeks, missing Christmas and New Year's, while the investigation and legal proceedings continued. During this time, the district attorney's office asked Brian to take a polygraph test, which he passed successfully. After this, the district attorney's office had little evidence to link Brian to Adrian's murder, so they released him from custody. 9 months into the investigation, the police in Mansfield, Texas, finally got a breakthrough, and it came from Annapolis, Maryland, where Diane Zamora was attending the Naval Academy. Diane Zamora, a cadet at the Naval Academy, allegedly confessed to her fellow students that she and her boyfriend, David Graham, had murdered a girl named Adrienne Jones in Mansfield, Texas. The Mansfield police traveled to Annapolis, Maryland, to interview Diane, but she denied making any such admission. The Naval Academy suspended Diane and sent her home pending an investigation. Since Diane was uncooperative, the police went to the Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs, Colorado, to question David. Initially, David claimed he didn't know why Diane would fabricate a story about killing Adrienne Jones. However, during the interview, David began to crack and asked to write a statement. In a 4.5-page confession letter, David detailed how he and Diane planned and carried out the murder of Adrienne Jones, including a cross-country event in November 1995, where he offered to drive Adrienne home. During the ride, David and Adrienne parked in an elementary school parking lot and had sex. Afterwards, David felt overwhelmed with guilt because he loved his girlfriend Diane deeply and knew that his infidelity would cause her immense pain. One evening, while David was helping Diane study for her SATs, they got into an argument. Unable to keep his secret any longer, David broke down in tears and confessed his infidelity to Diane. He told her that he had hooked up with Adrienne, which shattered Diane's heart and left her feeling deeply hurt and angry. Diane was inconsolable and lashed out at David, screaming and arguing with him. She was so angry that she wished he were dead, and she felt intense hatred towards Adrienne. Diane's emotions were too much to handle, and she struggled to come to terms with what had happened. David pleaded with Diane, promising to do whatever it took to save their relationship. David and Diane decided that the only way to repair their relationship was to kill Adrienne. In his confession letter, David admitted that on December 3rd, he called Adrienne Jones and asked her to secretly leave her house late at night to meet with him. He specifically asked Adrienne to keep their meeting private and not tell anyone else about it. David originally planned to lure Adrienne into a trap, kill her by breaking her neck, and then dispose of her body in a lake. On the agreed night at 2:30 a.m., David picked up Adrienne in his car while Diane hid in the hatchback. They drove to a secluded spot 10 miles out of town, turning off the highway onto Satan Road. David stopped the car, and Adrienne subtly adjusted her seat, creating the impression they were about to be intimate. Unbeknownst to Adrienne, David had secretly signaled for Diane to emerge from the trunk. Diane came out of the rear of the vehicle and approached the front. Diane confronted Adrienne, who was seated in the passenger seat. Diane then hit Adrienne on the head with a weight from David's gym set. Despite being severely injured, Adrienne managed to escape by crawling out of the car window. David and Diane panicked, and David grabbed his 9mm Makarov weapon to chase after Adrienne. Adrienne was severely injured and collapsed in a nearby field due to her head wound. When David caught up to her, he shot her twice and then returned to his car. After Adrienne died, David and his accomplice Diane exchanged "I love you" as their first words to each other. The police later questioned Diane, who had a statement prepared to confess her involvement. David and Diane were arrested and charged with capital murder. Although they initially confessed, they later retracted their statements, with David claiming Diane acted alone and Diane alleging David committed the crime by himself. In 1998, Adrienne's mother requested that the death penalty be removed as a possible sentence for David and Diane. Diane's trial began in February 1998. Multiple witnesses testified that Diane showed no remorse for killing Adrienne. The jury found Diane guilty of capital murder, resulting in an automatic life imprisonment sentence, with the possibility of parole in 40 years. David Graham was convicted of murdering Adrienne Jones and received a life sentence, with the possibility of parole in 40 years. The case of Rhonda Casto. Stephen and Rhonda, both 23, embarked on a hike along the Eagle Creek Trail. Before they started, Rhonda took a photo of Stephen with her cell phone and jokingly texted her mother, saying he might either propose to her or push her off a cliff. The weather was lovely as they continued their walk. However, Stephen later reported that Rhonda's behavior became strange. She asked him what he would do if something happened to her, and if he would care for their daughter. He reassured her that he would. As the weather started to deteriorate, Stephen suggested they head back, but Rhonda did not turn back. Instead, she wrapped a towel around her shoulders and began running down the narrow, slippery path. Stephen alleged that Rhonda lost her footing and fell about 150 feet down the Eagle Creek Trail. After her fall, Stephen claimed he hiked down to the ravine where she landed, but he had no cell service. He tried to call 911 but couldn't get through, so he left her behind, holding her body until he had to leave. Stephen says he hiked to the trailhead, where he finally reached emergency services for help. Later that day, rescuers retrieved Rhonda's body. However, Rhonda's family reported that Stephen showed no emotional response during her memorial service. Stephen disputes this, claiming he was overwhelmed with grief and continuously crying, but often withdraws from others when deeply upset. Following Rhonda's death, Stephen quickly gathered his and his daughter's belongings and relocated to the other side of Oregon to be closer to his own family. This sudden move raised suspicions among Rhonda's family, who began questioning what had transpired between the couple in the moments leading up to Rhonda's death. In 2006, Stephen moved from the United States to China with his young daughter. This bold move marked a fresh start for both of them. Having previously lived in China during his first marriage, Stephen was drawn to the country and its people. He chose to settle in Wuvi, a city about 75 miles outside of Shanghai. Stephen's decision to teach English to Chinese business people proved to be a great opportunity. His daughter, too, quickly adapted to her new life in China, becoming fluent in Mandarin within just 2 months. Both Stephen and his daughter thrived in their new surroundings. During his time in China, Stephen met and fell in love with Landy Yin Yan. Landy formed a strong bond with his daughter, Man, taking on a motherly role that brought them closer together. Stephen was deeply grateful for Landy's influence in his daughter's life. After a year of dating, Stephen proposed to Landy, and she happily accepted. In February 2015, Stephen and his daughter returned to the United States, where the couple planned to get married. Stephen and his fiancée planned to hold 2 wedding ceremonies, one in America and one in China, to include their families and friends from both countries. Stephen and his daughter arrived in the United States a day before his fiancée, flying into San Francisco to catch a connecting flight to Oregon. As they exited the plane, an officer approached Stephen, telling him they needed to detain him due to an issue with his luggage. The police soon arrived, taking Stephen into custody and separating him from his daughter. What Stephen didn't know was that, during his time in China, detectives had been working tirelessly to investigate Rhonda's death. The suspicious circumstances surrounding her fatal fall from Eagle Creek had led them to continue their inquiry, ultimately concluding that Stephen was responsible for her death. Rhonda's mother played a crucial role in keeping the investigation into her daughter's murder open, regularly contacting detectives for updates. Eventually, the police arrested Stephen at an airport for Rhonda's murder and extradited him to Oregon. When questioned, Stephen claimed he thought he was dreaming and hoped to wake up at home in China with his girlfriend Landy. Unfortunately, his nightmare was reality. Initially, Stephen's bail was set at $2 million, and he spent 14 months in jail awaiting trial. However, the judge later reduced his bail to $250,000, which his attorney secured, and Stephen was released with an ankle monitor. Rhonda's family was overjoyed to learn of Stephen's arrest, knowing justice was finally being served. The arrest brought relief and comfort to Rhonda's loved ones, who had been grieving her loss for years. Stephen's attorney then conducted experiments at Eagle Creek Trail, where Rhonda died, to argue in court that her death was an accidental slip rather than a push by Stephen. The Eagle Creek Trail, where Rhonda fell to her death, is one of the most popular hiking spots in the Columbia River Gorge, known for its breathtaking beauty. During Stephen's preliminary hearings, the medical examiner who performed Rhonda's autopsy revealed a crucial piece of evidence. All of Rhonda's injuries were below the waist. This finding was key to Stephen's defense, as it suggested that Rhonda might have taken her own life. The defense team argued that Rhonda's injuries, including her broken pelvis, were consistent with a feet-first fall, rather than a head-over-heels tumble, which would indicate that she was pushed. Additionally, they presented notes from Rhonda's therapy sessions, which showed that she was depressed, but never expressed suicidal thoughts. Rhonda had previously stated that her relationship with Stephen was unloving. The defense team used this, along with her history of depression, to suggest that Rhonda might have intentionally taken her own life. By presenting this evidence, they hoped to discredit the prosecution's claim that Stephen had pushed Rhonda, resulting in the injuries that ultimately led to her death. Stephen made a claim that Rhonda had suffered from depression and had attempted suicide multiple times before they met, but Rhonda's family disputed this and accused Stephen of lying. They suggested that Stephen was trying to shift the blame onto Rhonda for her death, to distract from his own role in her murder. Stephen also stated that Rhonda had struggled with drug addiction since she was 12, claiming that she had experimented with various substances. However, the medical examiner's report only found slight traces of marijuana and the prescription medication Rhonda was taking for anxiety and depression, which she had been experiencing due to postpartum depression. During the preliminary hearings for Rhonda's murder, disturbing evidence came to light, implicating Stephen in her death. It was revealed that Stephen had been in a romantic relationship with Rhonda's 16-year-old sister, Melanie, despite being in his 30s. This discovery raised serious concerns, given the significant age gap between Stephen and the underage Melanie. The prosecution argued that Stephen's inappropriate relationship with Melanie, his girlfriend Rhonda's sister, could have been a motive for Rhonda's murder. Rhonda had discovered her husband's infidelity, leading to tension and a possible reason to kill her. After Stephen was arrested for Rhonda's murder, he was also charged with multiple counts of sexual assault and sodomy related to his relationship with Melanie. Before his murder trial, in 2005, Stephen pleaded guilty to 2 counts of sexual abuse, admitting to having sexual intercourse with Melanie twice. However, he later claimed that he was forced into making this admission and that it was false. Stephen said he only pleaded guilty because it would allow him to fight for custody of his daughter, and he was desperate to get her back. In contrast, the state alleged that the relationship between Stephen and Melanie lasted for over 4 years. Stephen eventually admitted to having a sexual relationship with Melanie, Rhonda's teenage sister. Rhonda sent a text message to her teenage sister Melanie, expressing her negative feelings towards Stephen. In the message, Rhonda called Stephen a piece of garbage and accused him of using Melanie to hurt her. This suggests that Rhonda was aware of Stephen's manipulative behavior, which her mother confirmed. According to Rhonda's mother, Rhonda loved Melanie and wanted to repair their relationship, which had likely been damaged by Stephen's actions. Evidence presented in court revealed that Stephen's relationship with Rhonda was not as perfect as he claimed. Additionally, the court learned of Stephen's disturbing past, including a deviant sexual history. Specifically, it was revealed that only 6 months after the death of his daughter Rhonda's mother, Stephen was arrested and charged with 5 counts of sexual abuse for allegedly touching a 13-year-old girl. Stephen denied the allegations against him, but later confessed to sending inappropriate text messages and a photo to the victim, admitting his actions were wrong and pleading guilty to sexual harassment. In court, evidence presented included photos of Rhonda's bruised back, taken by herself. Rhonda's friend testified that she had overheard arguments between Rhonda and Stephen when they were on the phone. Additionally, Stephen's ex-wife testified that he had previously attempted to harm her. Despite denying the allegations, Stephen was not charged in China. Rhonda's family, however, remains convinced that Stephen was responsible for her death, believing he was motivated by a life insurance policy he had taken out on her, which he had recently increased. Her mother shared her concerns, revealing that Stephen had suffered significant financial losses from day trading the previous year and was struggling financially. Additionally, those who knew Rhonda well can confirm that she adored her 9-month-old daughter, and it's unthinkable that she would have ended her own life by jumping from Eagle Creek in May 2017. Rhonda's family was stunned to learn that the state had reached a settlement with the defense, resulting in Stephen pleading guilty to criminally negligent homicide, a lesser charge than murder. Despite believing that Stephen had murdered Rhonda, the state's case was weak due to a lack of physical evidence proving he had pushed her from the Eagle Creek Trail. Stephen received credit for time served while awaiting trial, but was required to remain on parole for 3 years. After his release, Rhonda's family and friends felt that justice had not been served, believing Stephen should have faced harsher consequences for his actions. At Stephen's sentencing hearing, Rhonda's sister delivered an emotional impact statement, condemning Stephen for destroying their family and causing immense pain and sorrow. Rhonda's mother also spoke, expressing her bewilderment and frustration, saying that Stephen's actions had shattered their family and left them heartbroken. Stephen said he didn't push Rhonda, but took a deal because he was running out of time to regain custody of his daughter. He claimed he was willing to accept the consequences for his actions to protect his child. However, Rhonda's family and friends didn't believe him. In a 2018 interview, Stephen made a shocking claim about Rhonda's death. He said that when he found her on Eagle Creek Trail, she was still alive. The interviewer asked if Stephen had ended Rhonda's life to spare her further suffering. Stephen responded by asking a hypothetical question: if you shoot a suffering fellow soldier to end their pain, is that murder? He suggested that in some cases, such an act could be seen as justified, although still a form of homicide. While Stephen never directly admitted to harming Rhonda, his comments hinted at the possibility of his involvement in her death. Rhonda's mother applied for Social Security survivor benefits in 2017 on behalf of Rhonda's infant daughter. She claimed the child lived with her and promised to use the funds solely for the baby's care. However, the state accused her of fraud, alleging that between 2010 and 2014, the child actually lived with her father, Stephen, not with Rhonda's mother as claimed. The state charged Rhonda's mother with stealing nearly $40,000 in government funds over 5 years. Her defense team argued that she was trying to prevent Stephen from gaining custody of his daughter and accessing a $1 million life insurance policy he had taken out on Rhonda's life. The defense also highlighted Rhonda's mother's struggle with depression, which worsened after Rhonda's death. They claimed that she used marijuana to cope with her grief, which impaired her judgment and clouded her thinking. Rhonda's 53-year-old mother was sentenced to a month in a halfway house and 3 years of probation for stealing government funds. She had pleaded guilty to the crime and was also ordered to repay the $39,100 she stole. Rhonda and Stephen's daughter was placed in foster care in October 2015, after the Department of Human Services took custody of her. This happened because Stephen pleaded guilty to sexually abusing a 13-year-old girl, which led an Oregon court to terminate his parental rights. However, Stephen is appealing this decision. The case of Crystal Rogers. Crystal Rogers, a devoted 35-year-old mother of 4 from Bardstown, Kentucky, shared custody with her ex-husband Keith despite their separation. They maintained a friendly relationship for their children's sake. Crystal lived 45 miles southeast of Louisville with her current boyfriend, Brooks Holt, and their 2-year-old son. As a responsible and reliable parent, Crystal always responded to her mother Sherry Ballard's calls. However, when Sherry couldn't reach Crystal on July 5, 2015, she grew concerned. It was unusual for Crystal to ignore her mother's calls, and Sherry's worry intensified with each passing hour. After 24 hours of silence, Sherry's maternal instincts told her something was wrong. She tried contacting Crystal multiple times, but her efforts were met with silence. Sherry then reached out to Crystal's friends and family, hoping someone could provide information about her daughter's whereabouts. Crystal's family had not seen or heard from her in a while, which was unusual. Her sister Brooke tried to reach her but couldn't, and her boyfriend Brooks said he hadn't seen her since Friday night, when she was playing games on her phone before he went to bed. When Brooks woke up the next morning, Crystal was gone, and he thought she might have gone to visit her cousin for the 4th of July. However, Crystal's mother Sherry was worried and tried to contact her, but couldn't. She reported Crystal missing to the police, and just then, her son Casey got a call from a friend who had seen Crystal's car on the side of the road. This made Casey and his father Tommy very concerned, as they knew Crystal would never leave her car behind. When they arrived at the location, they found Crystal's car with a flat tire, which only added to their fear that something was seriously wrong. If Crystal had car trouble, she would have contacted someone for help, not tried to fix it herself. The fact that her keys, phone, and purse was still in the car on the passenger seat was suspicious. Crystal never went anywhere without these belongings, so their presence added to the concern about her safety. After finding her car on the Bluegrass Parkway, Crystal's father and brother notified the Nelson County Sheriff's Department. Investigators searched the car, but found no signs of a struggle. However, they did notice something unusual. The driver's seat was adjusted for someone taller than Crystal. This raised suspicions that someone else might have been driving her car. The authorities asked for witnesses to come forward, but no one provided any useful information to aid the investigation. The police decided to seek the public's help through the media, releasing Crystal's photo and asking for anyone with information to come forward. Despite their efforts, no significant leads were discovered. Crystal's father, Tommy, took matters into his own hands, organizing search parties to find his daughter. However, the challenging hot and humid weather conditions hindered their searches. Many people helped search for Crystal, but one person who was noticeably absent was her boyfriend, Brooks Holt. The police grew suspicious of Brooks because he seemed unconcerned about Crystal's disappearance, especially since she was the mother of his child. When questioned, Brooks claimed that Crystal and their son had gone with him to his family's farm the night before. Brooks said they returned home around midnight, and he went to bed. He stated that Crystal stayed up late playing games on her phone, as she often did. Brooks claimed that when he woke up at 7 a.m., his son was in bed with him, but Crystal was missing. At first, he thought maybe she had gone out with her cousin. However, those close to Crystal disagreed with Brooks' story. They knew Crystal would never leave her 2-year-old son behind, as they were extremely close. In fact, Crystal's sister, Brooke, believed Crystal was planning to leave Brooks because he had been dishonest with her and showed little emotional attachment. Crystal had told her mother, Cher, that she wanted to end her relationship with Brooks, but she was afraid to do so because he was controlling. Crystal's brother, Casey, had also noticed the tension between them and had seen them arguing several times. The police asked Brooks to come in for questioning and gave him a polygraph test, but the results were inconclusive. After the test, Brooks had a formal interview with the detectives. They had gathered evidence that supported his alibi. including a video that showed his truck entering his family's farm and leaving around midnight. However, because the truck had tinted windows, they couldn't determine who was in the vehicle at the time. Brooks explained that while he was at the farm, he did some chores, set a fire to dispose of building materials, and waited for the fire to die out before driving back home. During the interview, the police asked him about a brief 13-second phone call he made to a business associate, Steve Lawson, on his way back from the farm. To clear up any confusion, Brooks asked Steve Lawson to explain their conversation to the police during the interview and called him. However, the police was skeptical when Steve Lawson claimed he had called Brooks to ask for the phone number of a rental property, as it sounded like a rehearsed alibi. According to Steve Lawson, Brooks told him he needed to wait until he got home to get the number from Crystal, who handled such matters. The police were puzzled by this, questioning why Brooks couldn't simply hand the phone to Crystal, who was with him at the time, and resolve the issue right then. They wondered why Brooks had to wait to talk to her in person. During the interview, Brooks received a call from his brother Nick, a police officer at the Bardstown Police Department, who advised Brooks to leave the interrogation room immediately. The police were skeptical that Crystal had voluntarily abandoned her car on the side of the Bluegrass Parkway. They suspected that something had happened to her while she was at the Brooks HW family farm. As the investigation into her disappearance progressed, several people came forward claiming to have seen Brooks's truck and his brother Nick's police car at the Howe family farm. Detectives became increasingly convinced that the brothers were at the farm, attempting to destroy evidence related to Crystal's disappearance. To obtain more information, the police decided to bring Nick, Brooks's brother, in for questioning. They confronted him with eyewitness accounts that placed him at his family's farm on July 8th, and asked him to provide an explanation for his presence there. Nick claimed to have no idea what the police were referring to, and said he wasn't out that night. But the police didn't believe him. They directly asked Nick if he and his brother had destroyed or hidden evidence related to Crystal's disappearance. Nick firmly denied any wrongdoing and swore that his brother was incapable of harming anyone. The police officer, Nick, was adamant that he would never assist in covering up a crime, including helping Brooks. After the interview, Nick agreed to take a polygraph test, but he failed 2 questions: whether he knew Crystal's current location and if he was withholding information about her disappearance. Despite failing the polygraph, Nick insisted he was telling the truth. On October 15th, the police investigation identified Crystal's boyfriend, Brooks Holt, as the prime suspect in her disappearance. The same day, Nick, Brooks' brother, was fired from the Bardstown Police Department for hindering the investigation. Although the police were confident they knew who was responsible for Crystal's disappearance and death, they lacked sufficient evidence to make an arrest. They were hesitant to take their suspect to court without solid evidence, fearing an acquittal would prevent them from retrying the case due to double jeopardy. In Kentucky, the FBI and local law enforcement joined Crystal's friends, family, and volunteers in an extensive search effort at the 240-acre Howe family farm. Despite daily searches, Crystal's loved ones were left frightened and desperate for any news. The searchers hoped to find Crystal safe and sound, but they also needed answers. At the farm, investigators thoroughly examined the remains of a fire, but they didn't find any human remains. They did discover pieces of clothing in the ashes, but they couldn't link them to Crystal's disappearance. The police issued multiple search warrants for the farm, targeting vehicles and homes. However, these searches didn't produce any significant leads or evidence related to Crystal's case. A $100,000 reward was offered for information about her disappearance, but no one came forward with any information. Tommy Ballard, Crystal's dad, was driven to find his daughter. Her disappearance hit him hard, especially since he'd already gone through a similar tragedy. In 1979, his pregnant sister was brutally murdered by her husband and his friend. They shot her, beat her, and then burned and scattered her remains on a farm. Though it took years, the perpetrators were eventually caught, convicted, and sentenced to life in prison. Despite this painful past, Tommy refused to give up on finding Crystal. He pursued every lead, no matter how small, and explored every avenue. He talked to neighbors, interviewed potential witnesses, and contacted anyone who might have information. To aid his search, Tommy spent his own savings on hiring experts, including cadaver dogs and a private investigator. Tommy Ballard was determined to solve the mystery, so he kept detailed records of every tip he followed and clue he found. He regularly met with the police to share his discoveries and get their input. On an early November morning in 2016, Tommy took his 11-year-old grandson, Crystal's son, on a hunting trip on their property. Tommy's wife, Sherry, watched as they left, feeling a sense of unease. She quickly said a prayer, asking God to watch over them in the woods. Sherry then returned to bed, trying to relax. However, just minutes later, the phone rang, shattering her peace. When she answered, she heard her panicked grandson on the other end. "Papa has been shot," he cried, his voice trembling with fear. Sherry's heart sank, and she was overcome with panic. She rushed to the bathroom, grabbing clothes as she went, while her grandson continued to cry on the phone. Sherry quickly reassured her husband, telling him she was calling 911 as she rapidly got dressed. Her mind was flooded with worries about his condition. When she arrived at the scene, she was met with an overwhelming sense of grief. She rushed to Tommy's side, shaking him vigorously, but her distress turned to horror as she saw blood gushing from his nose. When officers and witnesses arrived, they quickly pulled Sherry away from Tommy so that medical personnel could tend to him. However, Sherry knew her husband was already dead. Tommy Ballard was pronounced dead at the scene, having been shot once in the chest. Initially, the police suggested that Tommy's death was a hunting accident, which outraged Sherry. She was adamant that this was not an accident, but rather a deliberate murder. As the investigation unfolded, authorities ruled out the possibility that Tommy took his own life, finding that his weapon had not been fired. They also cleared Tommy's 11-year-old grandson of any involvement in the shooting. Eventually, the Kentucky State Police announced that they were treating Tommy's death as a murder investigation. The Ballard family believes that Tommy's murder was connected to his investigation into his daughter Crystal's disappearance. They think those responsible for harming Crystal wanted Tommy silenced, fearing he might uncover the truth. In 2022, the FBI led a 5-day investigation into Crystal Rogers' disappearance, returning to the Haar family farm to gather more evidence. Their goal was to collect enough evidence to hold the responsible individual accountable. Although the FBI didn't disclose what they found, a spokesperson confirmed in October 2022 that all evidence collected would be analyzed at the FBI's lab in Quantico as the investigation continued. The Kentucky Attorney General made a key decision, appointing a special prosecutor to help with the prosecution of criminal charges related to the deaths of Crystal Rogers and her father, Tommy Ballard. Crystal's mother, Sherry Ballard, was informed of the appointment and strongly supported it, believing it was necessary to ensure justice for her loved ones. In July 2023, a Kentucky grand jury indicted 32-year-old Joseph Lawson on 2 counts: conspiracy to commit murder and tampering with physical evidence, both related to Crystal's disappearance. 2 months later, Crystal's boyfriend, Brooks Houck, was arrested and charged with murder and tampering with physical evidence. The judge set his bond at $10 million and ordered him to avoid contact with Crystal's family. The people of Bardstown felt a mix of emotions when Brooks Houck was arrested for Crystal's murder. While the news was heartbreaking, bringing home the reality that Crystal was not just missing, but had been killed, many felt a sense of satisfaction, knowing that justice would be served. The arrest brought a sense of closure and relief to those affected by Crystal's tragic death. Brooks Houck appeared in court virtually 1 month after his October 2023 arrest. This crucial hearing brought new revelations about another unsolved Bardstown murder. The judge asked prosecutor Shane Young if his team was investigating any other cases connected to Crystal's case. The prosecutor was investigating 2 connected murders, Crystal's murder and the murder of her father, Tommy Ballard. They believed they had the gun used to kill Tommy, which they claimed to have purchased from Nick Houck, who allegedly used a fake name during the sale. Brooks Houck's attorneys requested that the Nelson County judge be disqualified from the case, citing bias and unfair treatment since 2017. They also argued that the $10 million bail was excessive. However, the Kentucky Appeals Court ruled against Houck, upholding the $10 million bond and denying his request to replace the judge. In a separate development, Stephen Lawson was indicted in December 2023 on charges of conspiracy to commit murder and tampering with physical evidence. Notably, Stephen Lawson's son, Joseph Lawson, had been arrested in connection with Crystal's disappearance. The case of Jennifer Dulos. Jennifer Dulos was born on September 27, 1968, in New York City to Hillard Farber, a banker, and Gloria Farber, a philanthropist. She graduated from Brown University in 1990 and went on to earn a master's degree in writing from New York University's Tisch School of Arts. Her uncle, Arthur Ortenberg, co-founded the fashion company Liz Claiborne Inc. in 1976, not in 2004. Jennifer married Fotis Dulos, and they had 5 children together, 2 sets of twins and a daughter, all named after Greek saints. They was together for 13 years until their marriage began to unravel in 2017. Jennifer grew afraid of her husband, who had seemingly changed. This raises questions about Fotis Dulos' background. Fotis Dulos was born on August 6, 1967, in Turkey, and grew up in Athens, Greece. He moved to the United States in 1986. He attended Brown University, graduating in 1989, and later earned a master's degree in finance from Columbia Business School. Fotis met his first wife, Hilary Vanessa Alama, at Brown University, and they married in Athens in 2000. However, their marriage ended in divorce in 2004. During their marriage, Fotis had an affair with Jennifer, whom he married in September 2004, just a month after his divorce. Jennifer Dulos loved her life and would never intentionally leave her children behind, which made her disappearance suspicious to the police. Before she vanished, Jennifer had filed for divorce and was seeking sole custody of her kids. Her marriage to Fotis had become increasingly toxic, and she feared for her life and the lives of her children. The Dulos marriage began to unravel in 2017. Jennifer first publicly hinted at her marital troubles in a blog post on March 12, 2012, where she expressed her desire to be stronger and less intimidated by confrontations. In 2017, Jennifer Dulos filed for divorce, citing her husband Fotis Dulos' increasing independence and alleged infidelity with Michelle Troconis, a Venezuelan native. Jennifer sought emergency custody of their 5 children, but the court denied her request, instead granting joint custody to both parents. Jennifer feared for her life and her children's safety, accusing Fotis of exhibiting irrational, bullying, threatening, and controlling behavior. She recounted a disturbing incident that had occurred on June 3, 2017, when Fotis discovered she had planned activities for their children on a Saturday morning. This revelation angered Fotis, causing him to lose control, become enraged, and launch a verbal attack on her. Jennifer Dulos felt threatened by her husband Fotis after she filed for divorce. In an interview, she expressed her fear, revealing that Fotis had threatened to kidnap and harm their children if she didn't comply with his terms in the divorce settlement. During the hearing, Jennifer requested emergency custody of their children. The court found that Fotis had violated multiple court orders, leading to Jennifer being granted full physical custody of the children. Both parents, however, shared legal custody. Fotis was deeply hurt by Jennifer's allegations. In a 2017 email, he voiced concern for their children's well-being, emphasizing that they needed both parents, not just one. He implored Jennifer to reconsider their marriage for the sake of their children. Despite denying Jennifer's accusations, Fotis countered that Jennifer was alienating their children from him, labeling him a psychopath, and telling them he didn't care about them. Jennifer Doulos was last seen on May 24, 2019, at 8:05 a.m. when she dropped off her children at New Canaan Country School. She returned home shortly after. However, her concerned friends alerted the police when she failed to show up for her scheduled doctor's appointments in New York City at 11 a.m. and 1 p.m., which was unusual for her. Jennifer's live-in nanny, Lauren Almeida, arrived at her New Canaan apartment at 11:30 a.m. and found her Range Rover parked in the garage, which raised her suspicions. Despite this, Lauren didn't notify the police until 7 p.m. By then, it was clear that something was amiss, as Jennifer never stayed out late without informing anyone or left home without telling anyone. After the disturbing reports, the police began their investigation. Some detectives searched Jennifer's New Canaan house. However, they would break the hearts of everyone who cared about Jennifer Doulos. On the floor of the garage, blood splatters were found, and blood traces were found on one of the walls in the garage and the door. Blood traces were discovered on the outside of the Range Rover, and inside the house, blood splatters were found only in the kitchen. Notably, the bloodstains were a mixture of Jennifer Doulos's and her husband Fotis Doulos's. This raised questions about how Fotis Doulos was involved in his wife's disappearance. Further investigation by the police revealed that Fotis Doulos had visited Jennifer's apartment on the day she vanished. According to the police, Fotis arrived at Jennifer's home on a bicycle. Fotis waited for his wife to return from dropping their children off at school, then ambushed and shot her in cold blood. He subsequently cleaned up the crime scene and disposed of the evidence. At approximately 10:25 a.m., a CCTV camera captured the Chevrolet Suburban leaving Jennifer's home. The police suspected that Fotis Doulos was the driver. They alleged that he had hidden Jennifer's body and other items related to the crime scene cleanup in the car. After hiding Jennifer's body, Fotis Doulos abandoned the car 3 miles away from New Canaan. His suspicious behavior later that day led police to believe he was a cold-blooded murderer. Around 7:30 p.m., surveillance footage captured Fotis Doulos and his girlfriend, Michelle Traconis, dumping trash in multiple bins on Alford Avenue in Hartford. What seemed like a normal activity at first glance became suspicious due to the fact that they used 30 different trash bins. When police searched the bins, they found incriminating evidence, including cleaning supplies, blood-stained clothing, and used hand gloves. Forensic testing of these items confirmed the police's worst fears. The blood found at the scene was matched to Jennifer Doulos. Additionally, Fotis Doulos's DNA was discovered on a glove and a trash bin. While many people were shocked by Fotis Doulos's involvement in his wife's murder, they were even more surprised by the role of his girlfriend, Michelle Traconis, in the crime. Michelle Traconis, a Venezuelan native, had a diverse background as a mother, horse rider, and former ESPN reporter in South America. However, no one expected her to be involved in a violent crime. Michelle Traconis began a romantic relationship with Fotis Doulos while he was still married to Jennifer Doulos. Their affair contributed to the breakdown of his marriage. After Jennifer's disappearance, the police questioned Traconis. When asked about her whereabouts on the day Jennifer went missing, Traconis claimed she had lunch with Fotis Doulos that afternoon. She also stated that they went to one of his properties to clean it up in preparation for a meeting with a client. The police suspected that Jennifer Doulos's body had been disposed of. Their investigation uncovered additional incriminating videos featuring Michelle Traconis, which ultimately revealed the details of Fotis Doulos's brutal crime. Fotis Doulos had meticulously orchestrated the events, and the police were convinced that he had an accomplice. On May 24, 2019, Fotis drove a stolen Tacoma truck belonging to his employee to New Canaan, Connecticut. A school bus captured footage of a Tacoma truck speeding towards Waveney Park in New Canaan at 7:05 a.m. The police later found Jennifer's Chevrolet Suburban at this location. A bicycle tire was discovered in the truck's boot, leading the police to suspect that Fotis Doulos had cycled from Waveney Park to Jennifer's apartment in New Canaan. The police believed that Fotis arrived at Jennifer's apartment before her, attacked her in the garage, cleaned up evidence, and drove her body to Waveney Park in the Tacoma truck. The police found two crucial pieces of evidence at the New Canaan house: Fotis's DNA on the doorknob and a mixture of his and Jennifer's blood on the kitchen faucet. The police thought that Fotis spent hours cleaning the house, as evidenced by the neighbor's surveillance footage showing Jennifer's Chevrolet Suburban leaving the house around 11 a.m. 5 days after Jennifer's disappearance, Fotis took the Tacoma truck to a local car wash and detail shop, accompanied by Michelle Troconis in her SUV. The police suspected that they was trying to eliminate evidence. However, they found samples of Jennifer's DNA on the truck's passenger seat. With mounting evidence against him, Fotis Doulos became the prime suspect in Jennifer's disappearance. He was arrested and charged with capital murder and kidnapping on June 7, 2020. Fotis Doulos had been arrested earlier on June 1, 2019, along with Michelle Troconis, on charges of hindering prosecution and tampering with evidence. However, they were released due to insufficient evidence. Fotis and Michelle were arrested again in September 2019 for the same charges and released once more. In October 2019, Fotis Doulos appeared in court, requesting a dismissal of the charges against him. During this time, Jennifer and Fotis's children were living with their maternal grandmother, who was granted temporary custody by the court. Fotis Doulos's situation took a turn for the worse in January 2020, when he was arrested and charged with capital murder, and Michelle Troconis was arrested for conspiring to murder. Following their arrest, Michelle distanced herself from Fotis, stating that she had made a huge mistake by trusting him. Prior to their 2020 arrest, Michelle had moved out of Fotis's $5 million home in Farmington with her daughter. Fotis's former lawyer and friend, Kent Douglas Mwini, was also arrested and charged with conspiracy to murder, allegedly for helping Fotis and Michelle create an alibi on the morning of Jennifer's disappearance. Mwini was a member of a local gun club and had been accused of spousal rape by his wife, who feared for her life. The police searched the property in question and found a shallow grave with 2 bags of lime and a blue tarp, although no body was found. The grave was discovered in August 2019 with the help of a canine. Despite the arrests, Jennifer's body was not found, leaving her family devastated. They felt no sense of closure, as even the incarceration of her murderer could not bring her back. Fotis Doulos's bond was set at $6 million, and he was released the next day on bail. He was to return to court on February 8, 2020. Michelle Troconis was released on bail, while Douglas Mwini's bond was set at $2 million, reduced to over $200,000, and he was released on bail on October 19, 2020. On January 28, 2020, Fotis Doulos failed to appear in court for an emergency hearing. He was found unconscious in his car, having attempted to take his own life by poisoning himself with carbon monoxide. The police performed CPR, restoring a faint pulse, and he was transported to the hospital. A suicide note was found in his car, claiming he was not ready to spend an hour in jail over something he knew nothing about. While in the hospital, his children, who were living with their grandmother, visited him for the first time since he was accused of murdering Jennifer. Fotis Doulos was confirmed dead on January 30, 2020. After his death, the police report revealed that his last girlfriend, Anna Curry, claimed she was with him on the day of his emergency hearing and had planned to drive to court together, but he preferred to go separately. The murder charges against Fotis Doulos were dropped on March 3, 2020, as the case could not continue after his death. The prosecutor has a year to refile the case, or it is permanently dismissed. Fotis Doulos' attorney, Norm Pattis, expressed his interest in clearing his client's name, arguing that Fotis had been framed and the evidence found was planted by the real murderer. He requested to substitute Fotis Doulos' estate as the defendant, but the request was not considered. Michelle Troconis was still on house arrest, accused of conspiring to murder Jennifer Doulos, but the COVID pandemic put her case on hold. There was no progress on her case, with her next court appearance scheduled for August 6, 2020, while Douglas Mwini was to appear on June 2, 2020. Both pleaded not guilty to the charges. Michelle Troconis addressed critics who judged her without knowing her, acknowledging that people can be misjudged, but she couldn't say whether Fotis Doulos was capable of murdering his wife. However, she did realize it was a mistake to trust him. 4 years after Jennifer Doulos' disappearance, she remained missing. The police searched extensively, starting at Waveney Park, near New Canaan, using canines and helicopters. When that yielded nothing, they expanded the search to New York City, where the Doulos family owned a property. The investigation continued in central Connecticut, with surveillance footage showing Fotis Doulos disposing of garbage bags in Hartford. This led the police to the city's garbage processing plant, where they found useful evidence after weeks of searching. They also searched a fishing pond in Avon, frequently visited by the Doulos family, and houses connected to Fotis' company, covering approximately 3,000 acres. In August 2021, the search focused on a Farmington house linked to Fotis Doulos, where they brought in an expert in finding unmarked graves and used septic tank and excavator equipment. However, Jennifer's body was still not found. Despite the horrific circumstances, a positive outcome emerged. In May 2021, the Connecticut State Senate passed a domestic violence bill named after Jennifer Doulos and another domestic violence victim, Jennifer Magnano. The bill received near unanimous support and was signed into law by Governor Ned Lamont on June 28, 2021. Jennifer Doulos' family still struggled to cope with her loss. In an interview, a family spokesman shared how much they missed her and how her bright personality affected even those who didn't know her. The case of Katrina Ashley Edlund Smith. Katrina Ashley Edlund was born on July 16, 1982, to her mother Vicky. She had 2 siblings, an older brother named Chad and a younger sister named Miranda, who looked up to Katrina as a role model. As children, Miranda would often try on Katrina's clothes and use her makeup, admiring her older sister and wanting to be just like her. As the years passed, Katrina and Miranda formed a strong bond, becoming more like best friends than sisters. Katrina grew up in Musney Park, Illinois, a suburban community outside the city, after her parents separated, and she lived with her mother. Those who knew Katrina described her as a kind, fun-loving person who cherished the holiday season and enjoyed giving humorous gifts to her friends and family. She was deeply involved in her church and had a strong desire to help others, always willing to lend a hand to those in need. Despite her happiness, Katrina longed to find love and thought she had found it when she met Todd Smith at a bar when she was 20 years old. Todd, a self-employed financial planner, had 3 daughters and worked from home. He met Katrina, and despite their differences, they clicked. Todd's flexible schedule allowed them to travel frequently. After 3 years together, Todd proposed to Katrina, and she happily accepted. They planned a small wedding in a local park, and Katrina was thrilled about their future. She loved Todd's daughters and was eager to build a life with him. Katrina's family, including her mother Vicky and siblings Chad and Miranda, adored Todd and thought he was an excellent match for Katrina. They trusted him to take care of her and believed the couple was meant to be. After marrying, Katrina and Todd settled in Musney Park and started their new life together. On October 20th, 2012, Katrina, 30, called her mother and said she was house-sitting for a friend. During their conversation, she mentioned she would visit for dinner on October 24th and had news to share. Vicky suspected that something was amiss, but she couldn't quite put her finger on what it was. Before ending their phone call, Vicky promised Katrina that she would cook her favorite meal, chicken and dumplings. Tragically, Vicky would never get the chance to keep that promise. Days later, Katrina vanished, and Vicky would never lay eyes on her again. On October 23rd, at 5 p.m., Todd, Katrina's husband, called 911 to report her disappearance. He told the dispatcher that Katrina was house-sitting for a friend and that he had been trying to reach her for hours without success. When he drove to the house, he found it empty. Katrina's siblings, Miranda and Chad, were alarmed when they heard the news. Chad, who was undergoing military training in Oklahoma, immediately flew to Illinois to help search for his sister. On the evening of the 23rd, a concerned citizen notified the police about an abandoned vehicle near Rock River. The caller reported that the car was not parked on the road, but rather in an easement, suggesting it had been hastily abandoned. When authorities arrived to investigate, they ran the license plate and identified it as belonging to Katrina Smith. Upon inspecting the vehicle, the officer found no signs of a struggle or any trace of Katrina herself. Katrina's mother, Vicky, was adamant that her daughter's disappearance was a clear indication of foul play when she learned that Katrina's car had been abandoned in an unfamiliar area. It was the only logical explanation to Vicky. If Katrina's car was found in that location, someone must have taken her and left the car there. Following the discovery of her car, Katrina's case was officially categorized as a missing person, and the search efforts intensified significantly. On October 12th, at 11 p.m., the police took Todd Smith in for a formal interview at the Winnebago County Sheriff's Department. During the interview, Todd told the detective that he last saw his wife Katrina on October 10th, not October 22nd. He stated that Katrina had come home briefly to do laundry in preparation for a big job interview the following day. According to Todd, while the laundry was in progress, Katrina left to go to the mall to make a purchase and returned home at 8:30 p.m. Todd reported that Katrina briefly returned home before leaving again to make one last stop. She had told him she needed to complete an errand before returning to the house she was watching for a friend. The next day, after Katrina was declared missing, Todd made an emotional appeal to the media, pleading for her safe return. Overcome with emotion, he broke down in tears as he begged for anyone with information about her whereabouts to come forward. As the search for Katrina continued, search teams composed of officers and volunteers worked tirelessly to find her. They focused their efforts on a nearby park, where Katrina's car had been abandoned, hoping to find evidence or clues about her disappearance. When Katrina's brother Chad arrived in Illinois from his army training in Oklahoma, he joined the search for his missing sister at the park. With his military background, Chad took charge of the search party. He created a map, divided the volunteers into teams, and coordinated their efforts to ensure a thorough search. As the search continued, the officers employed a methodical approach, using dogs and walking in straight lines to cover as much ground as possible and detect any potential evidence, no matter how small. Meanwhile, Katrina's mother Vicky focused on spreading awareness about her daughter's disappearance. She posted missing person flyers at gas stations, convenience stores, and lampposts throughout the town, hoping to reach as many people as possible. Despite her overwhelming grief and fear of finding her daughter's body, Vicky was determined to keep searching for Katrina, even if she couldn't participate in the physical search herself. Todd, Katrina's husband, was overcome with emotion during this difficult time. Chad, trying to be supportive, urged Todd to stay strong and focused on finding Katrina. He stood by Todd's side, sympathetic to his brother-in-law's grief. Meanwhile, the police investigation turned up some disturbing clues. An officer found Katrina's purse near her abandoned car, and as he searched further down the road, he discovered more of her belongings, including her cell phone and bloody towels. It was clear that someone had deliberately discarded Katrina's possessions as they drove away from her car. Unfortunately, the police still had no idea where Katrina was, but they feared the worst. The recovered items were sent to the crime lab for analysis, and the police awaited the results with bated breath. As the police searched for clues, they explored every aspect of Katrina's personal life to understand what might have led to her disappearance. They wanted to know if she had any relationships outside her marriage, was involved in gambling or drugs, and what her daily routines were like. To gather this information, they interviewed her friends and family. Everyone they spoke to described Katrina as a kind, responsible person who always put her duties first and avoided anything risky. Her loved ones said she was dedicated to her job and had a strong work ethic. They also reported that she never showed any signs of addiction or irresponsible behavior. The people who knew Katrina described her as a loyal partner and a hard worker who always did the right thing. During the investigation into her disappearance, a woman came forward with an interesting clue. She claimed to have seen a blue car, similar to Katrina's, parked on a bridge over Rock River on the night she vanished. The trunk was open, and someone was kneeling behind it. Although the witness couldn't describe the person's gender or race, her tip led the police to suspect that Katrina might have been a victim of foul play and ended up in the river. However, they still needed concrete evidence to support this theory. The police continued to investigate Katrina's disappearance, looking into potential motives and suspects. Despite seeming to have a happy marriage, her husband Todd was still a person of interest. As the authorities knew that hidden conflicts or secrets can exist in any relationship, their inquiry led them to a teenager in town who had previously shown an unhealthy obsession with Katrina. Earlier in the year, Katrina had confided in friends about the boy's behavior, including allegations of voyeurism, such as spying on her through her bedroom window. This had made Katrina increasingly anxious at the time. Although the boy's activities had stopped when he left for college, the police wondered if he might have returned and resumed stalking Katrina. They devoted significant resources to finding him. 3 days into the search, crucial clues were discovered on Katrina's cell phone, which was being examined at the crime lab. The phone proved to be a crucial source of evidence for the investigators. By examining Katrina's cell phone records, they uncovered a wealth of information, including her text messages, call logs, pictures, videos, and GPS location data. This information enabled the police to reconstruct a more accurate timeline of Katrina's activities. The investigation revealed that Katrina was having an affair with a co-worker, Guy Gabriel. Initially, they had met after work and developed a connection that eventually turned romantic. However, a background check on Guy Gabriel exposed a troubling history of domestic violence. Additionally, the detectives found text messages in which Guy Gabriel demanded that Katrina leave her husband Todd for him. Given Guy Gabriel's violent past and his messages to Katrina, he became the top suspect in her disappearance. The police suspected that Guy Gabriel might have reacted violently towards Katrina because she refused to leave her husband for him. When Katrina's family discovered her affair with Guy, they were shocked and disbelieving. The seemingly perfect couple, Katrina and Todd, had hidden a dark secret. The news of Katrina's infidelity devastated Todd, who was unaware of the affair until the police investigation. Guy Gabriel was questioned by the police at the station, and although he appeared nervous, he admitted to the affair, but denied any involvement in Katrina's disappearance. He claimed to have been at work on the night she went missing. During the investigation, the police uncovered an incident that had occurred 2 weeks before Katrina's disappearance. Witnesses reported that a black Volkswagen Jetta had sped through the parking lot of the auto shop where Katrina and Guy worked, causing a scene during lunchtime. A mysterious driver in a VW Jetta threw a stack of flyers out of the car's sunroof, scattering them among the employees gathered outside. The flyers contained a derogatory remark about Katrina and Guy Gabriel's relationship, but the identity of the driver remained unknown. Meanwhile, the police questioned Katrina's hairstylist, who shared that Katrina had confided in her about feeling unsafe and threatened. Katrina had even considered buying a gun for protection and had become paranoid about being followed. She had gone so far as to take her phone to a store to check for a tracking device, suspecting that someone was monitoring her movements. At the police garage, crime scene investigators searched Katrina's car for clues and used a special chemical called luminol to detect blood. They found a large amount of blood in the trunk. Meanwhile, a firefighter pulled a mysterious object from the water, which turned out to be a severely decomposed female body. The body was difficult to identify due to its condition. At the medical examiner's office, dental experts compared the body's teeth to Katrina Smith's dental records and confirmed that the body belonged to her. The autopsy revealed that Katrina's cause of death was blunt force trauma to the head. Katrina's family was devastated by the news, and her mother, Vicky, was in disbelief. The police cleared the teenage boy who had been allegedly stalking Katrina as a suspect after verifying his alibi. The police then turned their attention to Guy Gabriel, Katrina's boyfriend outside of her marriage. Guy provided an alibi, claiming he was at work during the time of Katrina's disappearance and murder. His managers and co-workers corroborated his alibi, and the police cleared him as a suspect. Although Guy was no longer a suspect, the police asked for his perspective on who may have hurt Katrina. Guy revealed that Katrina's husband, Todd, exhibited controlling behavior and encouraged Katrina to leave her marriage. The police investigated Katrina's marriage and discovered several concerning details, including Katrina's desire to divorce Todd, her meeting with a divorce attorney, and her separation from Todd. The police suspected Todd of being behind the mysterious flyer incident at Katrina's workplace. Their suspicion grew stronger when they discovered that Todd had test-driven a black Jetta, similar to the car involved in the flyer incident, around the same time it occurred. When the police informed Katrina's family that Todd was the prime suspect in her murder and was already in custody, they were shocked and devastated. Katrina's mother, Vicky, was particularly affected, feeling physically ill at the thought that Todd could be responsible for her daughter's murder. The police also discovered that Todd's financial investment company was facing legal troubles, providing a potential motive for the crime. Katrina was the sole breadwinner for her family since Todd was unemployed. The police suspected that Todd might have motive to kill his wife, as he would gain access to their funds if she left him and their daughters. To gather evidence, the police obtained a search warrant for the couple's home. During the search, they found a baseball bat in the garage with brays of blood on it, which led them to believe it might be the murder weapon. The autopsy revealed that Katrina's injuries were consistent with blunt force trauma, suggesting a bat was used. A DNA test confirmed that the blood on the bat was Katrina's, linking the bat to the crime. The police also found a clean area under the car, which seemed suspicious. Further examination revealed that the bloodstains matched Katrina's DNA profile. 30 days after Katrina's murder, Todd was arrested and charged with her killing, bringing relief to her family. At his trial, the prosecution presented evidence that Katrina had recently visited a divorce attorney, indicating marital problems. On the night of the murder, Katrina had gone to Todd's house to do laundry for a job interview the next morning. The prosecution alleged that Katrina told Todd their marriage was over, triggering his violent reaction. They claimed that Todd grabbed a baseball bat, killed Katrina in the garage, and then disposed of her body by throwing it off a bridge at Rock River. The jury found Todd guilty and sentenced him to 55 years in prison. The case of Greg Mulvihill. Diana Lovejoy and Greg Mulvihill, both living far from their families, met through an online dating site in 2005. They quickly formed a strong bond, and their relationship soon turned serious. The couple then decided to move in together in San Diego. Diana had always been passionate about athletics and fitness, starting with playing sports in high school and eventually becoming a competitive triathlete. The couple shared a love for the outdoors, which played a significant role in their relationship. During the 2000s, San Diego was emerging as a major tech hub, and Diana and Greg took advantage of the abundant job opportunities. Both Diana and Greg excelled in their careers, with Diana being known for her dependability by her coworkers. After 2 years of dating, they got married in 2007, marking the beginning of a new chapter in their lives. For their honeymoon, they chose Costa Rica, where they attended surf school. Diana and Greg were deeply in love during the early years of their marriage. They shared a passion for life and made the most of every opportunity that came their way, enjoying countless adventures together. After their wedding, they moved to Carlsbad, a picturesque suburb north of San Diego, which offered a perfect blend of natural beauty, outdoor activities, and seclusion. Diana was immediately smitten with the area and felt like she was living her dream when she settled into her ideal home. However, 3 years into their marriage, their relationship started to take a turn. Diana began to experience symptoms that led her to believe she had fibromyalgia, a chronic condition characterized by widespread pain and tenderness in specific areas of the body. Although the exact cause of fibromyalgia remains unknown, several factors are thought to contribute to its development. Diana's fibromyalgia diagnosis significantly impacted her marriage to Greg. Previously an energetic and adventurous person, she struggled to adapt to her new limitations, including reduced stress and rest. This sudden change in lifestyle created challenges for their relationship as a couple. In 2011, Greg took Diana on a relaxing vacation to Santa Cruz, California, to help her cope with her condition. As a caring husband, Greg recognized the toll fibromyalgia was taking on Diana's well-being, including constant muscle pain, fatigue, and limited energy. The illness made it difficult for her to maintain her job, and eventually, Diana had to step away from her career to focus on managing her symptoms. She began spending more time at home in Carlsbad. Above all, Diana's greatest desire was to be a mother, to love and raise a child, to be confident and happy. Diana and Greg had been trying to have a child for years, but unfortunately, Diana suffered multiple miscarriages. These losses took a toll on Diana, affecting her both physically and emotionally. Although she didn't have children, she poured her love into her 2 beloved cats, Lanny and Turtle. However, her world was turned upside down when Turtle fell ill and eventually passed away. To comfort Diana during this difficult time, Greg surprised her with a new kitten, which she named Taffy. This thoughtful gesture brought Diana immense comfort. In a surprising turn of events, Diana discovered she was pregnant after years of unsuccessful attempts to conceive. Overjoyed, Greg looked forward to becoming a father, while Diana felt her dream of motherhood finally within reach. In September 2012, Diana gave birth to a baby boy, and Greg took time off work to bond with their newborn son. Greg loved being a father and cherished every moment with his son. Diana, on the other hand, was always worried about her son's health and happiness. As time passed, she started to suspect that her son might have a similar condition to her fibromyalgia. However, Greg was convinced that their son was healthy and didn't see any reason to worry. Despite their differing opinions on their son's health, Diana remained convinced that her son was ill. She began researching extensively and discovered a medication called guaifenesin, which was similar to Mucinex and often used to treat chest infections. Some people believed it could also alleviate fibromyalgia symptoms. Diana was determined to give her son high doses of guaifenesin, but Greg strongly opposed the idea, fearing it was unnecessary and could harm their son. This disagreement over their son's health care created growing tension in their marriage. Diana and Greg's marriage became increasingly strained after Greg suffered a shoulder injury that forced him to quit his job. As a result, the household income decreased, and Diana took a sales job to compensate. She also tried to earn extra money by creating online cooking videos, with Greg handling the camera work. However, this venture didn't yield the desired results. Diana also appeared in promotional videos for kitty litter, But this effort also failed to bring in significant revenue. As their financial struggles continued, Diana and Greg's disagreements escalated, particularly regarding their 2-year-old son's health. By this point, they were constantly fighting, and their relationship was in jeopardy. Diana confided in her co-workers that she felt Greg was unhelpful and unsupportive. In July 2014, Greg had a disturbing encounter with a police officer who questioned him about allegations of abuse made by Diana. According to the officer, Diana had filed multiple police reports against Greg, leading to his removal from the family home. Diana and their son were allowed to stay, leaving Greg to face the consequences of the allegations. Diana told a trusted friend that she had been assaulted by Greg while she was sleeping. She took medication that made her drowsy, and when she started to wake up, she realized Greg was touching her inappropriately without her permission. Diana also accused Greg of sexually abusing their son. The authorities, including Child Protective Services, got involved after Diana made these allegations. Greg denied the accusations and claimed that Diana was only making these charges because he disagreed with her about their son's health issues. In response, Greg filed for divorce from Diana and requested custody of their son. Detectives investigated claims that Greg abused Diana and their son, but found no evidence to support these allegations. In fact, psychiatric evaluations of Greg and the boy revealed no signs of abuse. A judge ultimately dropped the case and granted Greg 50-50 custody of their son, much to Diana's dismay. Despite this, Diana remained committed to being a good mother and distancing herself from Greg and the associated drama. As part of their divorce agreement, Diana stayed in the house and agreed to compensate Greg for his share of the property. By 2016, the former couple had managed to establish a relatively peaceful co-parenting arrangement, with each having equal access to their son. However, this fragile peace was shattered on September 1st, 2016, when the Carlsbad Police Department received a call from Jason Kovac, a friend of Greg's. Jason called 911 to report that his friend Greg had been shot multiple times and was bleeding severely. A patrol officer from the Carlsbad Police Department responded immediately and found Jason and Greg on the side of the road. Jason told the officer that the shooting had occurred about half a mile away. The officer quickly realized that waiting for an ambulance would put Greg's life at risk, so he decided to drive Greg to the hospital himself. Meanwhile, the SWAT team arrived and began searching the area for the shooter, but they couldn't find anyone. At the hospital, doctors rushed Greg into emergency surgery, where they discovered he had a gunshot wound to his chest. Greg survived the surgery, but he was placed on life support afterwards. While Greg recovered in the hospital, detectives interviewed Jason, who was still shaken by the event. Jason explained that Greg had received a call from a private investigator claiming to have important documents related to his custody and divorce proceedings with Diana. The investigator didn't leave his name, but he gave Greg a specific meeting time and location. Greg was initially hesitant, but his curiosity got the better of him, and he asked Jason to come along for backup. Jason agreed, and they armed themselves with a flashlight and a child's baseball bat. They arrived at the remote location, which was extremely dark due to the new moon. The only light came from a small sliver of the moon. According to Jason, the caller instructed Greg to find a package attached to an electricity pole. When Greg saw the package, he walked towards it with his flashlight, scanning the area. Suddenly, he shouted, "Gun!" and a gunshot rang out. Greg and Jason started running for their lives, with bullets whizzing past their heads. They eventually reached their car, where Jason realized Greg had been shot and called 911. Jason couldn't provide a detailed description of the shooter, but he led the detectives to the exact location of the shooting. During their investigation, they found an intriguing clue near the electricity pole, a neatly folded Angry Birds towel that seemed to be intentionally left there to deceive Greg. Jason reported hearing 6 gunshots, but the investigators found no evidence of shell casings or a weapon. This lack of forensic evidence suggested that the shooter was experienced and knowledgeable about covering their tracks. During their search, the detectives noticed a strong smell of feces in the air, which led them to a pile of feces accompanied by a towel that seemed to have been used for cleanup. The investigators preserved the feces sample and towel as potential evidence, carefully packaging and transporting them to the crime lab for analysis. However, obtaining DNA evidence from the feces sample could take up to a month. In the meantime, the detectives continued their search for a suspect, investigating all available evidence and following up on leads. They focused on Greg's estranged wife, Diana Lovejoy, and questioned her about her possible involvement in the shooting. Diana denied any knowledge and provided an alibi, stating she was at home with her son at the time of the shooting. Greg unexpectedly woke up from life support and began to recover. When he was well enough, he was interviewed by detectives, who asked about his estranged wife's potential involvement. Greg expressed doubt that Diana was capable of such violence, but acknowledged their past conflicts and ongoing divorce and custody battle over their son. The detectives acquired the phone number used to lure Greg to the remote area, which led them to a pay-as-you-go plan and a purchase at Best Buy near Carlsbad. They obtained video footage of the purchase, which showed Diana Lovejoy buying the phone. This solidified her as the prime suspect, and she was arrested during a traffic stop. Diana claimed innocence during her arrest, but when confronted with the evidence, she admitted to buying the phone. She then revealed that she was afraid of Greg, had purchased a gun, and took shooting classes at Iron Sights, where she met instructor Weldon McDavid, an ex-Marine weapons expert. Diana's friendship with Weldon turned romantic and intimate. She told the detective that they planned to scare her estranged husband Greg to stop his harassment. Weldon told Diana to buy a specific phone, which they used to lure Greg to a remote location. Diana claimed Weldon's role was only to threaten Greg, not to use violence. She drove Weldon to the site and picked him up afterwards. When she heard police sirens, Weldon told her he had to shoot Greg in self-defense because Greg allegedly made aggressive moves towards him. Diana denied involvement in the shooting and said she never asked Greg to take violent action against her. She was charged with conspiracy to commit murder and attempted murder. Greg recovered from his gunshot wound and was released from the hospital. However, news of Diana's involvement horrified people. Weldon was tracked down and brought in for questioning. Weldon told the detectives he was at home, 30 minutes away, on the night of the shooting. When asked for a DNA sample, Weldon became nervous. The detectives asked if his DNA would be at the crime scene, and Weldon claimed to remember stopping to use the bathroom on a dirt road the night before. The detectives obtained a search warrant and found a rifle with a live round and 6 spent shell casings in Weldon's garage. The shell casings matched a witness's account of hearing 6 gunshots. Weldon was arrested for attempted murder and conspiracy to commit murder. Searching Diana's house, the detectives found a suspicious search history on her computer. She had searched for "new moon," which coincided with the night of the shooting. This was significant because there was minimal ambient light during new moons, making it a suitable time for the murder. The detectives concluded that Diana had premeditated knowledge of the shooting and a motive to kill Greg. She would have had to pay him $120,000 in their divorce settlement, and eliminating him would be easier than paying the debt. Diana Lovejoy and Weldon McDavid's trial began in October 2017. Weldon claimed he never intended to shoot Greg. Weldon claimed his goal was only to scare Greg, but the situation escalated when either Greg or Jason yelled, "I got a gun." Weldon stated that, as a skilled marksman, if he had wanted to kill Greg, he would have been able to do so. However, the prosecution presented a different theory. They argued that Weldon did not shoot and kill Greg because Greg shone a flashlight in Weldon's eyes, disorienting him due to the darkness. Having sat in the dark for an extended period, Weldon's sense of direction was impaired. This ultimately saved Greg's life. The jury found Diana Lovejoy and Weldon McDavid guilty of conspiracy to commit murder and attempted murder. Upon hearing the verdict, Diana collapsed, although the state believes she was faking it. Weldon was sentenced to 50 years to life, while Diana was sentenced to 26 years to life. Both maintain their innocence. The case of Alexandria Kostial. Alexandria Ally Kostial was born on September 11, 1997, in St. Louis, Missouri. From an early age, her warm and caring personality drew people to her. She had a remarkable ability to make others feel at ease and happy, which made her a well-loved figure in her community. Ally's friendly nature allowed her to connect with people from all backgrounds. She was never afraid to approach someone new and start a conversation. Her kind and compassionate heart was evident in her willingness to help others, whether it was by lending a hand or simply listening to those in need. During her time at Lindbergh High School, Ally was an active student who participated in track and cheerleading. It was there that she met her best friend, Maddie Norris, and they formed a lifelong bond. Their friendship was built on mutual trust and a deep emotional connection, going beyond a typical friendship to become more like sisters. After graduating from high school, Ally enrolled at the University of Mississippi, also known as Ole Miss, in Oxford, Mississippi. Although several boys had asked her to prom, she didn't have a date. Luckily, her friend Maddie stepped in and offered to be her date. At Ole Miss, Ally joined the Alpha Phi sorority as a founding member and became the president of the Ole Miss Golf Club. She also immersed herself in the university's rich traditions, including its mascot, the Ole Miss Rebels. At a campus party, Ally met Eliza Brick, and they instantly clicked, as if they'd known each other for years. Ally's passion for capturing stunning sunset shots became a mission. One night, while out at a bar in downtown Oxford, Ally met Brandon Thydell from Fort Worth, Texas. She found him cute and developed a crush on him. However, Brandon's behavior ultimately hurt Ally, as she had trusted him to make an effort to connect with her and her best friend, Maddie. In July 2019, Ally's parents, Cindy and Keith, visited her in Oxford for a few days before her senior year at Ole Miss. They were excited to see their daughter thriving at the university and experience her life there. On their scheduled departure day, July 19th, Cindy called Ally around 7 p.m. Still half asleep from a nap, Ally mentioned her plans to go out with friends that evening. Unbeknownst to Cindy, this ordinary conversation would be her last with her daughter. About 30 minutes from Oxford lies Sardis Lake, a vast area popular for its hunting camps and recreational spots. On June 20th, 2019, an officer was tasked with patrolling the lake in the early morning hours when it was still dark and eerily quiet. While driving around the lake, the officer came across something unusual near a picnic table. Upon closer inspection, he was met with a grisly scene: a young woman's lifeless body, riddled with at least 9 gunshot wounds. The discovery of the body, later identified as Ally, at Sardis Lake prompted authorities to notify her parents, Cindy and Keith. However, the couple was far away in St. Louis, unaware of the tragedy that had unfolded. A middle-of-the-night phone call shattered their peace, informing them of the devastating news that their daughter had fallen victim to a homicide. After hearing the tragic news, Ally's friends took to social media to mourn her loss and call for justice. They created the hashtag #JusticeForAlly to bring their voices together and make their demands for justice louder. In their social media posts, Ally's friends shared happy memories of her and the positive impact she had on their lives. These heartfelt tributes aimed to celebrate Ally's memory and offer sympathy to her family. After Ally's tragic murder, her friends and community mourned the loss of a vibrant and joyful person. Cassandra Kendrick, a recent University of Mississippi graduate and close friend, expressed her sorrow. Brash, another recent graduate who worked in student housing, described Ally as someone with an infectious happiness and a positive outlook. According to Brash, Ally always had a big smile on her face, reflecting her bright spirit. Brash met Ally while working as a community desk assistant in Crosby Hall, the largest residence hall on campus. Ally would often stop by and chat with Brash when they were on duty. Brash remembered Ally as a sweet girl who lived life to the fullest and cherished every moment. Ally's sorority, Alpha F, issued a statement after her murder, expressing shock and sadness at the loss of one of their members. They extended their deepest sympathies to Ally's family during this incredibly difficult time and hoped for comfort for their sisters. Anna Pascoe, another close friend from the University of Mississippi, posted on Facebook to express her heartfelt condolences for the loss of her friend. She described Ally as the most genuine and uplifting person she had ever known, emphasizing the significant impact Ally had on the lives of those fortunate enough to have met her. Emily Groh, a fellow cheerleader of Ally at Lindbergh High School, took to Twitter to express her shock and sadness over Ally's murder. She cherished the time they spent together on the squad, praising Ally's bright and positive attitude. Emily regretted not having had the chance to get to know Ally better. At the Sardis Lake crime scene, where Ally's body was found, investigators discovered several cans of White Claw seltzer and .40 caliber shell casings scattered on the ground. A ballistic expert was called in to analyze the scene and piece together what had happened. The expert's findings revealed that the killer had initially sat across from Ally on the picnic table benches when they fired the first shot. However, after the first shot, the killer stood up and began circling the table, moving closer to Ally with each step. The expert theorized that with each step, the killer fired Ally again. One of the rounds fired by the killer missed its target and got stuck in the wooden picnic table. Crime scene investigators searched Ally's apartment, looking for any clues that could help identify and catch her killer. During the search, they found her Apple Watch, but surprisingly, her phone was nowhere to be found. Yet, some of her messages from the previous night had mysteriously synced with her watch. The investigators examined the content of these messages and discovered that Ally had been chatting with Brandon at length. The messages revealed that Ally and Brandon had planned to meet up. The detective in charge of Ally's murder case contacted Brandon on Sunday, the day after her murder, and asked him to come to the police station for an interview. Brandon told the detective he was unavailable that day, but offered to meet the next morning at 8:30 a.m. However, Brandon failed to show up for the scheduled interview. Following his no-show, the police began tracking his cell phone. The phone's location data showed that Brandon was driving on Interstate 55, heading towards Memphis. The police issued an arrest warrant for Brandon, suspecting he was fleeing, and broadcast a "Be on the lookout" alert for his vehicle, which was easily recognizable due to its unique license plate. 2 hours later, the Memphis Fugitive Task Force spotted Brandon's car at a gas station, where he was sitting at a pump. The agents apprehended Brandon and notified the Mississippi police. Upon searching Brandon's vehicle, investigators found a .40 caliber gun. Additionally, when Brandon exited the car, they noticed bloodstains on his clothing. Once Brandon was arrested and extradited to Mississippi, detectives started reconstructing his activities in the days preceding Ally's murder. On Saturday, July 20th, Brandon spent the day with friends, going bowling. The next day, he visited another friend's house, bringing a 6-pack of beer and his .40 caliber gun. The friend reported that they talked for a while, but when he woke up on Monday, Brandon had left. During the investigation, detectives found that Brandon had no history of physical fights or violence. They also gathered information from Brandon's friends and Ally's loved ones, who said that the couple had met at a local bar in Oxford during their freshman year and started dating casually. However, their relationship took a turn for the worse during their sophomore year. Ally's loved ones noticed that she became more invested in the relationship than Brandon, causing tension between them. This led to Brandon blocking Ally's attempts to contact him because she would often go out, get drunk, and call him. 1 year after their initial separation, Brandon and Allie rekindled their romance during the summer before her senior year. They decided to give their relationship another chance and started dating again. However, their reunion was short-lived, as Allie was tragically murdered, and Brandon was subsequently charged with capital murder, which carries the death penalty. Capital murder is the most severe criminal offense, and the state accused Brandon of kidnapping Allie by luring her to Sardis Lake. The news of Brandon's arrest sent shockwaves throughout Oxford, with the details of Allie's murder being widely reported. The arrest sparked widespread speculation and rumors among community members who exchanged various theories. Reporters flooded the town, seeking interviews and information from those closest to Allie and Brandon. This media frenzy brought both positive and negative attention to Oxford, as outsiders watched with a mix of fascination and concern. In September 2019, Brandon pleaded not guilty to Allie's murder. As detectives built their case, they reviewed the couple's text messages. In April 2019, 3 months before her murder, Allie was preparing for spring semester finals and considering the possibility of being pregnant. On April 14th, Allie sent Brandon a photo of an inconclusive home pregnancy test. Brandon responded, saying they would wait to confirm the pregnancy, but if it was true, he was against keeping the baby. He suggested Allie could get an abortion pill. Allie, however, was unsure about ending the pregnancy. She mentioned the possibility of meeting someone who would love her and the baby. Despite Allie's doubts, Brandon remained firm in his decision, telling Allie he was serious and that having a child would ruin his life. Detectives found CCTV footage showing Allie leaving a bar on Oxford Square around 11:45 p.m. on July 18th. About an hour later, around 1:30 a.m., Allie met up with Brandon, who drove them to Sardis Lake. According to Brandon's lawyers, both Allie and Brandon had been drinking throughout the day. Brandon's lawyers claim that when they arrived at Sardis Lake, they sat at a picnic table, listened to music, and at some point, Brandon got up to do drugs by his truck. He then returned to Allie, went back to his car, and got his .40 caliber gun. A shooting allegedly took place across the lake, according to Brandon's lawyer. After the incident, Brandon sat back down and talked with Allie for a while. However, things suddenly took a deadly turn when Brandon shot and killed her. Brandon's lawyer argues that his actions were caused by his intoxication from drugs and alcohol. Detectives and Allie's family saw the incident differently. They suspected Brandon of murder because they thought he believed Allie was pregnant, and this would ruin his life. In their view, the killing was a deliberate, cold-blooded, and well-planned act. On August 27, 2021, Brandon accepted a plea deal, spared from the death penalty, and pleaded guilty to first-degree murder. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Allie's loved ones, wearing her favorite color pink, filled the courtroom to show their support. After the judge announced the sentence, Brandon addressed Allie's family, expressing remorse for his actions and asking for their forgiveness. He acknowledged the immense pain he caused and hoped they could find it in their hearts to pardon him. Allie's autopsy report concluded that she was not pregnant at the time of her murder. However, this does not rule out the possibility that Allie was pregnant at some point. Allie's mother, Cindy, firmly believes that Allie was pregnant and lost the baby. A memorial was set up at Sardis Lake, where Allie was murdered by her family and friends. Her parents, Cindy and Keith, hold on to memories of their daughter, even though the silence is still painful for them. Every time Allie's friends see a pink sunset, they think of her. They have devoted themselves to keeping her memory alive, working to spread her positivity and make sure she is never forgotten. The case of Suzanne Morphew. Suzanne Morphew was born on April 11, 1971, to Jean and Adrian Alexandria, and grew up with her 2 brothers, David and Andrew. Those who knew Suzanne describe her as an intelligent, thoughtful, and caring friend. In 1998, while in high school, she met her future husband, Barry Morphew. After 6 years of dating, they got married. Barry was an exceptional baseball player and was signed with the Toronto Blue Jays. Meanwhile, Suzanne pursued a degree in education at Purdue University. However, Barry's sports career was cut short due to a serious injury, and he switched to a career in horticulture. Suzanne had been teaching for 4 years when Barry started his landscape company, which gradually gained momentum. The couple had 2 children, Mallory and Macy. They lived a picture-perfect life in Indiana until Suzanne was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma. Despite beating cancer twice, in 2018, the Morphew family decided to move to Mayville, Colorado, for a fresh start and to be closer to their daughter Mallory, who attended Western State University. They settled into a stunning 7-acre property where Barry could hunt and continue his work as a contractor. He also became a volunteer firefighter. Suzanne retired from teaching and dedicated more time to her church and her new hobby, sports mountain biking. The Morphew family seemed perfect from the outside, but they had their secrets. It wasn't until May 10th, 2020, that their problems came to light. That Mother's Day started off like any other at the Morphew residence. Barry and their daughters left the house, leaving Suzanne alone. Barry claimed he had a landscaping appointment in Broomfield, 3 hours away from Mayville by car. Meanwhile, the girls went on a camping trip. Barry and the girls planned to return home that evening to celebrate Mother's Day with Suzanne. However, when they didn't hear back from her, they started to worry. The girls sent her a message to wish her a happy Mother's Day, but got no response. This was unusual, since Suzanne was very active on social media. They expected her to be on her phone, especially since she was supposed to attend her best friend's daughter's wedding and share some photos. After several hours of no response, Mallory and Macy grew concerned and asked their neighbor, Martin Ritter, and his wife to check on Suzanne. Mrs. Ritter went to the Morphew house between 4 and 4:30 p.m. and found it empty. Barry's wife called him to explain the situation, and he advised her to check if Suzanne's mountain bike was still at the Morphew residence. If it wasn't there, he told her to contact the police, which is exactly what she did. The police arrived at the Morphew residence, and Barry, along with his 2 daughters, returned home, eager to learn about Suzanne's whereabouts and condition. A few hours into the search, the police discovered their first significant lead. 2 deputies found Suzanne's mountain bike near a steep ravine, not far from the Murphys' home. This suggested that Suzanne might have been involved in a crash. However, there were no signs of a struggle on the bike or in the surrounding vegetation, and no skid marks indicating that she had used her brakes. Despite the mountain bike being found at the bottom of a ravine with no damage, and no signs of struggle or disturbance to the surrounding vegetation, detectives suspected foul play. When presented with this evidence, Barry's reaction was unusual, and his subsequent explanation that a mountain lion must have moved the bike seemed far-fetched. Many people found Barry's behavior during the investigation into his wife's disappearance to be suspicious. In a private conversation with YouTuber Tyson Draper, Barry elaborated on his mountain lion theory. Notably, he was absent from the search parties organized by Suzanne's brother, Andrew, who was skeptical of Barry's account of the bike ride and suggested that Suzanne might have gone missing on May 9th instead of Mother's Day. As the investigation continued, suspicion shifted to Barry when Suzanne's helmet was discovered 1 mile from their home, precisely in the direction his truck's telemetry showed he had driven that morning. This discovery was particularly incriminating because it was in the opposite direction of the Broomfield construction site, which was his alleged destination that day. During the initial police interview, the suspect claimed he woke up to his alarm clock at 4:30 a.m. and drove directly to the Broomfield construction site. However, the telematic data from his Ford F-350 revealed that he drove 1 mile west before heading to the site. When confronted with this discrepancy, the suspect provided an explanation. He stated that he had gone scouting for elk that morning around 4:30 a.m. and was curious to see which direction they were headed so he could track them down later. He allegedly had a habit of tranquilizing elk and removing their antlers for sale. But when the officers questioned how he could have spotted elk at 4:30 a.m. if he was just waking up, he changed his story. He claimed he didn't set his alarm for 4:30 a.m. and woke up on his own. When questioned about the day of the disappearance, he stated it was one of the best days the couple had had in a while. He said he worked with a co-worker in Salita that morning, returned early, went for a hike with Susan, and then they grilled steak and were intimate together. Barry claimed that he and his wife Suzanne went to bed together, suggesting it might have been the last time they saw each other. However, as we've established, Barry is not a trustworthy witness. When the police investigated, they discovered that Barry had lied about almost everything that occurred that night. The first indication that something was amiss came when investigators reviewed Barry's phone and vehicle data on May 9, 2020. Although Barry and Suzanne did spend the afternoon and evening together, the events didn't match Barry's story. The first significant discrepancy arose between 2:42 and 2:44. Phone records showed Barry making erratic movements around the property. When questioned, Barry claimed he was likely hunting chipmunks with tranquilizers at 2:47 p.m. Then, Barry turned his phone to airplane mode, which remained active until 10:17 p.m. Furthermore, the steak dinner he claimed to have shared with his wife was called into question when investigators found only one dirty dish instead of two. Later that night, more peculiarities emerged on the Morphew property. During their examination of the data, the police found several concerning details that raised suspicions about Barry's activities later that night. At 9:30 p.m., an hour after he claimed to have gone to sleep with his wife, his car was seen reversing backward from the driveway, moving 96 feet. Investigators thought this might be when he loaded her body onto his truck, if he was guilty. The records also showed that between 3:25 and 3:48, the door to his truck opened and closed over 80 times. Although this evidence was circumstantial, it suggested that Barry was not telling the police everything, prompting a closer investigation into the events of May 10th. Further investigation revealed that Barry had no legitimate reason to be in Broomfield that day. His company's contract was not set to start until a week later, so there was no project for him to inspect. Barry claimed that he had only visited the Holiday Inn, the job site, a local store for granola and water, and briefly stopped at McDonald's to clean his windshield. However, surveillance footage obtained by the Colorado Bureau of Investigation contradicted his account. Barry was caught on camera throwing away 5 trash bags near McDonald's and the Holiday Inn. When questioned about it, he gave a suspicious explanation, claiming he was trying to avoid waste disposal fees by cleaning his car himself. However, when officers inspected his car, his story fell apart. A co-worker reported a strong smell of bleach and chlorine in Barry's hotel room a day after Suzanne disappeared. Additionally, investigators found that Barry had changed his clothes multiple times that day. Despite these suspicious actions, the investigators initially found no clear motive for Barry's behavior. But when they dug deeper into their personal lives, they discovered a motive. Barry and Suzanne's daughter revealed that the couple's marriage was not as happy as Barry made it out to be. Text messages on Suzanne's recovered phone and personal belongings proved this. In fact, Suzanne was extremely unhappy in the marriage and talked about how Barry refused to consider divorce. Suzanne kept a list of grievances on her phone, detailing a pattern of physical abuse. She was afraid to be alone in a room with Barry and worried about his drinking. She also suspected him of infidelity and tried to protect her phone from him, fearing he would seize it. On May 20th, when the police searched the Morphew house, they found a pen that Suzanne had bought to catch her husband in the act. Ironically, it recorded her own infidelity, not his. The pen revealed that Suzanne was having an affair with a man named Jeff, a high school acquaintance. The affair allegedly started in 2018 and had lasted for about 1.5 years. Although Jeff seemed like an obvious suspect, the police were able to clear him of any involvement in Suzanne's disappearance. The investigators believed that Barry had discovered Suzanne's infidelity, and that a note she wrote 2 days before she vanished supported this theory. The note indicated that Barry had accused Suzanne of having a boyfriend. The spy pen was crucial evidence, but it was not the only important discovery made during the search of the Morphew house. The police also found a tranquilizer dart cap in the family's dryer, a spent bullet casing in the bedroom, a large crack in the door frame, and remnants of Suzanne's journal in the fireplace. When combined with telematic data, these findings suggested that Barry might have planned and carried out the murder of his wife, possibly killing her in the afternoon of May 9th, 2020. After texting her boyfriend 53 times and sending a selfie at around 2:10 p.m., Suzanne never used her phone again. It wasn't until 2 weeks later that the public learned Barry was a suspect in his wife's disappearance, when the police conducted a 2-day excavation of a construction site in Salida, one of Barry's job sites. In response, Barry released a strange video proclaiming his innocence. However, he wasn't arrested until May 5, 2021, nearly a year after the investigation began. Although the evidence against Barry was largely circumstantial, the prosecution seemed confident in their case due to his changing stories, repeated lies, and clear motive. Barry was charged with multiple crimes, including first-degree murder of his wife, tampering with physical evidence, possession of a dangerous weapon, and attempting to influence a public servant. Moreover, he was later charged with filing a fraudulent election ballot in Suzanne's name, claiming he didn't know it was wrong and that it would help Trump's campaign. Barry pleaded guilty to this charge and paid a $600 fine. In August 2021, a preliminary hearing was held to determine whether Barry Morse's case would proceed to trial. During this 4-day hearing, the prosecution presented their evidence and proposed a theory of what might have occurred. According to the prosecution, Barry murdered his wife on May 9, 2020, then dismembered her body in a hotel room. He allegedly disposed of the tools used and buried her body in an unmarked grave. However, the defense strongly challenged the prosecution's account, highlighting several inconsistencies. They pointed out that cadaver dogs were unable to detect any human remains in Barry's car or the hotel room where the alleged dismemberment took place. The defense also suggested that the dart bullet cover might have been planted as evidence. Furthermore, they noted visual discrepancies in the photos of the dryer, with one image showing the cap inside the dryer and another image showing it was not present. The defense argued that Barry couldn't have used his dart gun in the alleged murder because it was broken at the time. However, their strongest evidence was the discovery of partial DNA on Suzanne's car and bike helmet that didn't match Barry. This DNA actually matched evidence from 3 unsolved sexual assault cases in Chicago and Arizona, raising reasonable doubt about Barry's guilt. The discovery was significant, but it was only brought up during the hearing because the CBI investigator who collected the evidence went on military leave before following up on the lead. To make matters worse, the defense was never informed about the foreign DNA matches and only learned about them during the hearing. This meant the prosecution had withheld important evidence that could have helped the defense. Throughout the hearing, the defense argued that the presence of another suspect with a criminal record meant the prosecution didn't have enough evidence to convict Barry of killing his wife. They asked the judge to make a quick decision, but surprisingly, he delayed it, citing the large amount of time and resources invested in the case. On September 7th, the judge ruled that the case against Barry would proceed, setting his bail at $500,000. Barry was released from county jail on September 20th, 2021, just 9 days before the trial was scheduled to start. However, in a surprising turn of events, the prosecution suddenly filed a motion to dismiss all charges against Barry without prejudice, allowing them to potentially reopen the case if new evidence emerges. Given the lack of concrete evidence proving Barry's guilt and the prosecution's misconduct, securing a conviction would have been a difficult task. Moreover, the prosecution had missed several crucial deadlines, resulting in sanctions that prevented 14 key witnesses from testifying at the trial. The news of the dismissal shocked the public, and Barry was pictured leaving the courthouse with a wide smile, accompanied by his two daughters. On September 22, 2023, investigators unearthed multiple shallow graves in Moffett, Colorado. During an investigation, Suzanne's remains were identified using her dental records and chemotherapy port. Surprisingly, over 50 miles away from the initial search area, focused on the mountains surrounding Barry's property. The discovery of her body raises questions about Barry's potential involvement in the murder. Although the police are certain Barry's truck was not in Moffett on May 9th and 10th, some suggest he could have had an accomplice in disposing of Suzanne's body, allowing him to travel to Moffett, bury the body, and return. If investigators obtained a subpoena for Barry's phone and car data for an extended period, they might be able to link him to the location where Suzanne's remains were found. For now, Barry appears to be cleared of suspicion, but the police and district attorney's office continue to investigate the case. The 12th Judicial District's district attorney told CNN that the case remains open and no further comment can be made until more information becomes available, while offering condolences to Suzanne's family. Barry's lawyer has spoken out strongly since the body was found, suggesting that Suzanne might have been a victim of a serial killer because her remains were discovered in a graveyard with many other bodies. She thinks the police wrongly accused Barry and hopes they will eventually admit their mistake. Meanwhile, Barry has filed a $15 million lawsuit against the prosecutors, sheriff's departments, and investigators, claiming they wrongly accused him of being involved in his wife's disappearance and death. The case of Shauna Nelson. Heather Hodges and Ignacio Gos met at a university party where Ignacio's friendly and charming personality immediately caught Heather's eye. It was instant attraction for both of them, and they soon realized they had fallen in love. Heather was a vibrant person with an innocent charm. Her striking features, including pale skin, red lips, and dark hair, captivated Ignacio, who affectionately nicknamed her Snow White. When Ignacio asked Heather out on their first date, she was thrilled and shared the news with her roommates, who joined in her excitement. As their relationship grew stronger, Ignacio continued to shower Heather with affection, surprising her with her favorite flowers and coffee. His thoughtful gestures made Heather feel loved and valued. After graduating from the University of Northern Colorado, Ignacio decided to take their relationship to the next level, proposing to Heather and receiving a happy yes in response. Heather set one non-negotiable condition for their engagement. If Ignacio ever cheated on her, she would end their marriage instantly, no matter how sorry he was or how hard he tried to make things right. She made it clear that infidelity was a deal breaker and she wouldn't tolerate it. Heather and Ignacio got married within a year, surrounded by loved ones on a joyful and beautiful day. After that, Ignacio became a police officer in Gray, Colorado, while Heather worked as a supervisor at the local credit union. Her colleagues and clients adored her for her exceptional ability to comfort them during difficult times. One co-worker even described her as wonderful in every way. After 5 years of marriage, Heather and Ignacio decided to have a child. They were overjoyed when Heather gave birth to a beautiful baby girl named Victoria. As a mother, Heather's entire world centered around her daughter, and she felt immense happiness. Ignacio also turned out to be an exceptional father. From the outside, it seemed like Heather and Ignacio had the perfect life. In 1997, Heather's life was forever changed when her father passed away from a heart attack. Just days later, her mother was diagnosed with cancer. Heather took on the enormous responsibility of caring for her ailing mother, selflessly dedicating herself to her care. Her mother eventually passed away in 2003. Heather's husband, Ignacio, was a devoted and caring partner who helped take care of their daughter Victoria and managed household chores. After providing emotional support to Heather during her difficult time, Ignacio's focus shifted towards his co-worker, Shauna Nelson, a dispatcher at the Gray Police Department. Shauna was married to Ken, a deputy at the Wells County Sheriff's Office, and they had 2 children together, but their marriage was struggling. At first, Shauna and Ignacio's interaction was friendly, but it gradually became flirtatious. They started exchanging playful comments and compliments, which caught Ignacio's attention. Over time, Shauna captivated him, and his interest deepened. Ignacio spent more time with Shauna, and their connection evolved into a strong emotional bond. As they continued to see each other, their feelings intensified. Their playful flirting turned into passionate and intimate feelings. Despite being married to others, they found themselves powerless against their attraction. The affair between Ignacio and Shauna became the center of town gossip, but Heather remained unaware of her husband's infidelity. Everyone knew the situation, but no one had the courage to tell Heather the truth. As a result, Shauna and Ignacio's secret relationship grew stronger while Heather remained unaware. When Shauna discovered she was pregnant, she excitedly told Ignacio the news. However, Ignacio was not happy and started doubting whether he was the father of the baby, suspecting that it might be her husband Ken's instead. Shauna reassured Ignacio that Ken was not the father because he had a vasectomy after their second child. Knowing that he would face severe consequences if Heather found out, Ignacio became anxious. He didn't want the baby and frantically searched for a solution with Shauna's consent. Heather had no idea that her husband, Ignacio, was having an affair with Shauna. Shauna, however, grew tired of being secretive and decided to confront Heather. One day, Shauna, accompanied by her friend Michelle, followed Heather to the grocery store. Shauna and Michelle discreetly trailed Heather around the store, watching her every move. Meanwhile, Heather, unaware of their presence, chatted with a friend on her phone. Eventually, Shauna approached Heather and hurled insults and accusations at her. The encounter left Heather deeply disturbed. Determined to get answers, Heather confronted Ignacio about the incident. She knew Shauna from his work Christmas parties and was aware that Shauna was his co-worker at the police department. When Heather asked Ignacio why Shauna, who had always been friendly towards her, would suddenly attack her in the grocery store, Ignacio explained that Shauna had romantic feelings for him, but reassured Heather that she had nothing to worry about. Ignacio promised Heather that he would tell Shauna to leave her alone. He followed through on his promise and confronted Shauna, telling her to stop bothering Heather. However, Shauna became very angry with him and refused to back off. Despite Ignacio's efforts, Shauna continued to harass Heather. One day, Shauna even showed up at Heather and Ignacio's house, demanding to speak with Ignacio. This made Heather suspicious of Ignacio's true intentions. Unbeknownst to Heather, Shauna had confided in a co-worker at the county dispatch center about her affair with Ignacio, revealing her strong feelings for him. Shauna expressed frustration that Heather, Ignacio's wife, was standing in the way of their relationship. According to the co-worker, Shauna also mentioned that she would relieve her frustrations by shooting at targets at the shooting range, imagining that the targets were Heather. Shauna had been having an affair with Ignacio for over a year, but her husband, Ken, remained unaware of the situation until he discovered Shauna's journal, which detailed her relationship with Ignacio. After discovering Shauna's infidelity, Ken chose to stay in the relationship for the sake of their children. Meanwhile, Shauna was aware that Ignacio was having multiple affairs, which motivated her to maintain control over him. She threatened to expose his secrets to Heather if he ever left her. Shauna's obsession with Ignacio intensified, and in July 2005, she got a tattoo of his family name on her leg to solidify her connection to him. Shauna's behavior became increasingly unhealthy, crossing into stalking territory. If Ignacio and Heather took their daughter Victoria out, Shauna and her family would coincidentally appear at the same restaurant. Despite recognizing Shauna's concerning behavior, Ignacio continued their affair. When Shauna became pregnant with Ignacio's second child, she insisted on keeping the baby, refusing to consider termination. Shauna had a son named Christian with her co-worker Oso in March 2006, while still married to Ken. To keep the truth from Oso's wife, Ken offered to raise Christian as his own if Shauna stayed married to him. Shauna agreed to this arrangement. Later that summer, a woman approached Heather, Oso's wife, with surprising news. Shauna had given birth to Oso's baby. Heather was stunned and demanded answers from Oso when she got home. However, Oso lied to her, trying to conceal his affair with Shauna. But one night in December 2006, Heather caught Oso in the act. She waited up for him to return and confronted him as soon as he walked in. This time, Oso decided to be honest with Heather. He confessed to being out with Shauna that night and revealed that their affair had been going on for years. He also told her about Shauna's 2 pregnancies, including her recent birth of his son, Christian. Heather's husband, Ignacio, confessed to having an affair with Shauna, and Heather kicked him out of the house. However, the next day, she called him back because she didn't want to break up their family and wanted to keep their marriage intact. Heather told Ignacio she loved him and knew he loved her back, but she wasn't ready to forgive him immediately. Instead, she gave him several conditions to fulfill before considering taking him back. These conditions included getting an STD test, seeking counseling, giving up his parental rights to Shauna's baby, and ending his relationship with Shauna. Ignacio agreed to all the conditions and ended his affair with Shauna. However, Shauna was furious and began harassing Heather, even sending her a text message with a picture of her and Ignacio's son, saying, "Flesh and blood." Shauna threatened to sue Ignacio for child support, and her harassment became so bad that Ignacio and Heather had to take precautions to protect their family and property. They even had to get a lawyer to send Shauna a formal notice to stop harassing them. Despite the warnings, Shauna continued to harass Heather through text messages, emails, and voicemails. On January 23, 2007, Shauna dressed in black, wore a Halloween mask, and brandished a gun. She approached Heather as she left work and shot her twice in the head at point-blank range, execution style. Heather died at the scene, and Shauna was later caught and charged with her murder. Ignacio rushed to Heather's trauma room, only to be met by a doctor with devastating news: Heather had passed away. This shattered Ignacio, who now had to break the heart-wrenching news to their 9-year-old daughter, Victoria. Telling Victoria that her mother was gone was the most difficult task Ignacio had ever faced. He remembered spending a long time holding and comforting her as they both cried uncontrollably. Meanwhile, at the crime scene, witnesses were sharing their accounts of the murder with the police. One witness described the shooter as suddenly appearing and fleeing in a red pickup truck. Another thought the shooter might have been a woman, judging by the way they ran. The investigation had already raised one name in connection with Heather's harassment: Shauna Nelson, who was aware of Oso's affair. Shauna, a police dispatcher, was suspected of being involved in Heather's shooting. The police were familiar with her and her husband Ken, a police officer, and knew that Ken owned a car similar to the one driven by the shooter. As evidence mounted against Shauna, the police issued an all-points bulletin, APB, for her and the red pickup truck she was believed to be driving. Ken, who was on patrol that night, heard the APB on his radio and immediately started searching for his wife. Within 20 minutes, he found her driving his vehicle near their home. Shauna claimed she had been running errands, but Ken was suspicious because she wasn't wearing shoes despite the cold January weather in Colorado. What really caught Ken's attention, however, was that Shauna was wearing his socks, underwear, and pants. He stopped her, called for backup, and requested assistance. Soon, police officers arrived and took Shauna into custody. The authorities then began investigating to determine if she was involved in Heather's murder. Shauna's DNA was found on a pair of shoes discovered near the crime scene, about 1,000 feet away. Additionally, investigators found two .42 caliber Glock Model 22 shell casings in the parking lot where Heather was shot. This was significant because Ken, Shauna's partner, used the same type of gun for work. These findings strengthened the case against Shauna. A Halloween mask similar to the one worn by the shooter was found hidden under the seat of Ken's red pickup truck. At Shauna's home, investigators found a fully filled bathtub, which led some to suspect she was preparing to wash away any potential blood evidence. After Shauna's arrest, her clothing and hands were tested for gunshot residue. The results were positive, further implicating her in the crime. With strong evidence against her, Shauna was charged with first-degree murder. Although the shell casings matched the weapon used to kill Heather, the judge sentenced her appropriately. However, there was a surprising twist. Ken Nelson, Shauna's husband, handed over his service weapon to his supervisor, but the actual gun used in the murder was never found. Despite this, Ken was charged with tampering with evidence and being an accessory to first-degree murder because he stopped Shauna after the murder but failed to detain her. During her interrogation, Shauna claimed she had gone out to run errands and had accidentally put on her husband's dirty clothes from the laundry basket. She said that when she arrived at the store, she realized she had forgotten her wallet and drove back home. When questioned about Heather's murder, Shauna denied any involvement or knowledge of the crime. The police also extensively questioned Ignacio, but he was cleared of all suspicion. In February 2008, Shauna's trial began for Heather Garris's murder. Shauna pleaded not guilty to the charges. During the trial, the prosecution argued that Shauna had a history of affairs with married officers, including Ignacio. Shauna's motive for killing Heather Garris, according to the prosecution, was her obsession with Ignacio. A key witness in the case was Michelle Moore, Shauna's former best friend, who often accompanied her when she would publicly bully Heather Garris. In exchange for a lighter sentence, Michelle agreed to cooperate with the state and testify against Shauna. Michelle testified against Shauna, describing how much Shauna despised Heather Garris and even admitting to helping plan her murder. Shauna took the stand to defend herself, denying the allegations. She vehemently denied telling anyone that she fantasized about killing Heather or picturing her during target practice. Shauna also denied being involved in Heather's death, claiming she was on her way to a liquor store at the time of the shooting. During her testimony, she suggested an alternative theory, accusing her best friend Michelle of being obsessed with her and wanting to make her happy by eliminating Heather. However, when Michelle was questioned as a witness, she rejected Shauna's allegations. The prosecution argued that Shauna wore her husband's clothing during the shooting to frame him for the crime. According to the prosecution, by killing Heather, Shauna's husband's wife, and Ken, her own husband, Shauna and Ignacio would be free to be together. After deliberating for just 5 hours, the jury delivered a verdict. Shauna Nelson was guilty of first-degree murder. The judge sternly addressed Shauna, declaring that she deserved every day of her sentence. Shauna's former best friend, Michelle Moore, was sentenced to 9 years in prison for her role in planning Heather's murder. Following Shauna's conviction, Ken Nelson, her husband and a police officer, resigned from the force and filed for divorce. He moved out of state with their children, including Shauna's son Christian, whom she had with Ignacio. However, Ken later returned to Colorado, hoping that one day the children could visit Shauna in prison. Despite the circumstances, Ken always believed that Shauna was a loving and dedicated mother. The charges against him were eventually dropped. Heather's loved ones are relieved that Shauna is behind bars, feeling that justice has been served, and they hope she reflects on the pain she caused Heather every day for the rest of her life. Shauna's selfish behavior resulted in Heather being separated from her family, which meant Victoria, Heather's daughter, was deprived of her mother. Tragically, in 2015, 17-year-old Victoria died in a car accident when she lost control of her vehicle and hit a tree, ending her life.